It's late again. The room is dark except for that small blue glow on your face. You're lying on your side, phone inches away, thumb moving almost on its own. Engagement photos, wedding videos, soft kitchen moments where someone is being hugged from behind while they make coffee. You watch strangers being chosen while you're here, in this quiet, wondering the same sentence you never say out loud. Will anyone ever love me? You don't always say it that clearly though. Sometimes it slips out as, is there something wrong with me? Other nights it's, am I just too much? Or maybe I'm not enough. On the worst nights, when another almost relationship disappears into silence, the question changes. Did I already miss my chance? Did love come and go while I was busy trying to be okay alone? You tell yourself you're fine, and most days you are. But the night has a way of stripping away everything you use to distract yourself. The scary part is how physical it feels. This question doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your chest, in that tightness that shows up after you see another happy couple walk past you. It lives in your stomach, in that heavy, sinking feeling when your message is left unread, or plans get canceled, or someone says, "You're amazing." But studies even show that rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. No wonder it hurts the way it does. You're not dramatic, you're human. And yet, people keep giving you the same lines. Just love yourself. It'll happen when you least expect it. You nod, you smile, but inside you feel even more alone because it doesn't touch the real fear. So this isn't going to be that. This is not a lecture about pretending you don't care or forcing yourself to be endlessly positive. It's a slower, more honest walk through why this question hurts so much and what can actually change, even if nothing in your relationship status changes tonight. We're going to look at where this belief came from, the way a distant parent, a distracted caregiver, or an early heartbreak quietly taught you what love means. The way social media turns love into a scoreboard, making you feel unchosen every time you scroll. The hardest part is not being single. It's the story your brain has been telling you about why you're single. Will anyone ever choose me? Turns into, will anyone ever stay? And then into, will anyone ever see me fully and not leave? Being alone right now doesn't mean you're unlovable. It doesn't mean you're running out of time. It just means this is the chapter you're in. We'll talk about what love really is beyond the movies and the highlight reels. How to build a life that doesn't collapse without a partner. How to become more open to real, grounded love without begging for crumbs. I can't promise who will walk into your life or when, but I can help you stop living as if love is impossible, or as if you're the one person it forgot. Because what scares me most is not the question, will anyone ever love me? It's the hidden answer you've already decided is true. That's where we're going next. That quiet story underneath everything is why this question cuts so deep. Will anyone ever love me? Doesn't feel like a thought you're having. It feels like something your whole body is asking, especially at night when the silence gets loud and there's no distraction left between you and your own heartbeat. From the very beginning, you were wired for connection. A baby can't feed itself, can't move itself to safety, can't survive alone, so your nervous system was built to scan for closeness, for a face, for arms, for someone who notices your cry and comes. Love starts as oxygen, being held, being looked at with softness, being kept in someone's mind when you're not in the room. That's how your body first learned what safe means. That's what attachment really is in simple terms. Before you had words, you were already collecting answers to questions you didn't know you were asking. If I cry, will someone come? If I'm scared, will someone stay? If I show need, will they soothe me, or sigh, or criticize, or disappear? Over time, those repeated moments become an invisible map. Not a theory about love, but a feeling of love. A sense of, people are there for me, or I'm on my own. So when you whisper, will anyone ever love me? Your nervous system doesn't hear a poetic question. It hears, am I safe? Do I get to exist here? To your body, being unwanted can feel like a threat to existence, which is why the fear feels so big and so disproportionate to what's happening on the surface. You're not being dramatic. You're feeling an old survival alarm going off. The hardest part is that it doesn't stop at fear. It sinks into shame. Shame isn't just, I did something wrong. It's something is wrong with me. When you're repeatedly rejected, neglected, or misunderstood by parents, by first loves, by almost relationships that never chose you fully, that pain quietly gathers into a story. If people keep leaving, it must mean I'm unlovable. It doesn't mean that's true. It just means your mind is trying to make sense of hurt. And the hardest part is how your body keeps the score, racing thoughts at night, replaying old conversations, scanning for the exact sentence where you went wrong, Trouble sleeping because every time you close your eyes, you see them choosing someone else. That hollow, echoing feeling after walking past couples holding hands, going home to your unmade bed, hearing the click of the door, and realizing no one is waiting for you. Loneliness doesn't stay in your head. It sits in your chest, your stomach, your throat. You're not the only one carrying this. So many people at 16, 26, 46, 66 lie awake with the same question. Even the ones who look confident, attractive, successful. Even the ones posting smiling photos with friends. You don't see the way they stare at the ceiling after the phone is down. You don't see the way they wonder if they're secretly the problem. The scary part is that the pain isn't just being lonely. It's believing that the loneliness is proof of a permanent flaw. That being unchosen so far means you were never meant to be chosen at all. Before we talk about how to be loved, I have to go back. We have to gently uncover where you first learned to suspect you might not be lovable at all, and ask whether that lesson was ever true. So instead of staying here in the question, I want you to go back with me for a moment. Not to your last breakup, not to the person who stopped texting back, but further. To the first time you felt love pull away and you quietly wondered, what did I do wrong? Maybe it was a night in your childhood bedroom, the light under the door fading as voices moved down the hall. You cried and no one came. Or someone did come, but only to say, stop crying, be strong, you're fine. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being alone with the message that your sadness is an inconvenience does. You learn quickly that certain feelings made love feel farther away. Think about the small, ordinary moments. A parent always busy, always tired, always on their phone or at work. You brought them a picture or a story from your day and heard, not now, more times than you can count. Or affection showed up when you got good grades, when you were helpful, when you were quiet and easy, and disappeared when you were messy, loud, or hurt. Love started to feel like something you had to earn by being low maintenance. As a child, you didn't have the language to say, my caregivers are limited, or they don't know how to meet my emotional needs. The brain doesn't work like that when you're small. It doesn't mean you were naive. It just means you were trying to make sense of pain in the only way that gave you any control. If the problem was them, you were helpless. If the problem was you, maybe you could fix it. So the quiet rules began to form. If I were better, they would stay. If I were quieter, they would be happy. If I were different, they would love me the way I need. The hardest part is how reasonable those thoughts felt at the time. They didn't sound like self-blame. They sounded like hope, like a plan to finally be chosen. I remember the first time I felt this with a friend instead of family. We were maybe 12 or 13, and there was this group I wanted so badly to be part of. I would study them from across the cafeteria, the way they laughed, the way they had inside jokes I didn't know, the way they moved through the hallway like they belonged to each other. And I tried. I really tried. I found my way in eventually, started sitting at the table, started laughing at the right moments, started making myself useful, funny, easy to be around. And for a while it worked. For a while I felt it. That warmth of being included, of mattering to a group of people. And then slowly it faded. The way those things always faded for me, plans started being made without me. Inside jokes started forming that I wasn't part of. And one day I realized I was eating lunch alone again and nobody had even noticed the transition. That's the thing nobody talks about. It's not always a dramatic rejection. Sometimes you just quietly stop being included and nobody marks the moment it happened. You just look up one day and realize you're on the outside again. What scares me most is how invisible those early conclusions become. They sink into the background, like a hum you stop hearing. And then they show up years later as, no one will ever really love me, or I'm always too much, or if I need less. Maybe they'll stay. You're not consciously repeating childhood, but the pattern is still running the show. And not everyone had obviously bad parents. Maybe your caregivers were kind, hardworking, doing their best. You can love them and still admit that something important was missing. Consistent comfort. Emotional safety, the sense that you didn't have to perform to be held. There's nothing wrong with noticing that gap. Loyalty and hurt can live in the same heart. Because those early attachment patterns don't stay in childhood. Quietly, they start choosing for you who you're drawn to, who you chase, who you run from. And if you look closely at your adult love life, you might see the echoes of that first unanswered cry. Those echoes don't just stay as memories, they turn into habits. You stop noticing them as patterns and start calling them just how I am. But under almost every "will anyone ever love me?" there's something quieter running the show. The way your nervous system has learned to expect closeness, to brace for distance, to protect you from being hurt again. That's all an attachment style really is. Not a diagnosis, not a life sentence, just a pattern of how you reach for love and how you flinch away from it. It's shaped early, in those first nights of crying or being soothed, but it doesn't stay in childhood. It walks with you into every crush, every situationship, every late night text you overthink. If your patterns lean anxious, love feels like a constant test you're about to fail. You send a message and watch the scene like it's a heartbeat monitor. A slow reply doesn't mean they were busy. It means you did something wrong. You notice every shift in tone, every extra period, every night they fall asleep without saying goodnight. You often feel like you care more, want more, ask more. And the scary part is how quickly distance turns into proof. Proof that you're too much, proof that you're not enough, proof that people always leave once they really see you. If your patterns lean avoidant, it looks different on the outside but hurts in the same deep place. You say you like your space, and you do, but there's also that tightness in your chest when someone gets close enough to matter. You start to feel suffocated when they ask what you're feeling, when they want more nights together, when they look at you like you're their person. So you downplay your needs, keep parts of yourself hidden, convince yourself you're better off alone. Underneath, there's often a quiet belief. If someone truly saw all of you, they wouldn't stay. So you leave emotionally first. For some people, it's both at once. Disorganized, fearful, avoidant. Whatever name you give it, it feels like craving a hug and flinching when arms finally wrap around you. You cling when you're scared, then push away when it starts to feel real. One night you're begging them not to leave. The next night you're cold, distant, promising yourself you don't need anyone. You feel too much and not enough at the same time. Guilty for wanting closeness and ashamed for running from it. The hardest part is thinking this is just your personality, or worse, your fate. That you're the anxious one, the distant one, the chaotic one, instead of a person whose body learned a specific way to survive love. There's nothing wrong with you for reacting like this. In the context where it started, it made sense. It kept you from breaking. But in adult love, these same patterns quietly answer your question for you. Anxious patterns chase people who won't fully choose you, then use their inconsistency as evidence that no one ever will. Avoidant patterns keep you half out the door, so no one can actually reach the parts of you that feel alone. And then, you tell yourself connection just isn't for you. Fearful patterns swing between pulling people close and pushing them away, until you start to believe you're simply too unstable to be loved. It doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means love has been filtered through old alarms. As long as those alarms run the script, you'll keep ending up in almost relationships, half-love, and painful endings that seem to confirm your worst fears. And that's usually where people start collecting proof that they're the common problem. What scares me most is how convincing that proof can feel. You look back at the people who left, the ones who never chose you fully, the nights you begged, the nights you shut down, and it starts to look like a pattern of being unwanted. But what if it's actually a pattern of how you've been taught to reach for love? In the next part, we'll walk into those past relationships and almosts, and gently ask, were they really proof you're unlovable, or were they mirrors of the attachment story you never knew you were telling? So let's walk into that history together. Not as a judge, but almost like you're opening an old box under your bed at night, when the house is quiet and the loneliness feels loud. Inside it are all the moments you've loved, or tried to, or waited to be chosen and weren't. It looks messy at first, but there's a story in there. You can probably see the first crush who never really saw you, the way you memorized their schedule, their laugh, the hope that maybe one day they'd turn and notice you in the hallway or at work. You see the person who texted you every night for weeks, then disappeared into silence like you were nothing. The almost relationship where you did everything couples do, except call it love, because they weren't ready. The ex you stayed with, long after your body knew it was over. I got good at performing. By the time I was in high school, I had it down to a science. I knew how to read a room, knew how to be whoever the moment needed me to be. Funny when funny was needed. Quiet when quiet was safer. Agreeable almost always, because agreeable kept people close. But here's the thing about performing. It's exhausting. And it's lonely in a completely different way than being alone is lonely. Because when you're performing, you're never actually being seen. You're just being accepted for the mask. And somewhere underneath the mask, the real me is still sitting there wondering, but does anyone actually want me? Not the performance. Me. Your brain is a pattern-finding machine, and the hardest part is how good it is at its job. It strings those scenes together like beads on a thread and says, see, this always happens. People always leave. I'm never chosen first. One breakup is painful, but a line of them starts to look less like coincidence and more like a verdict. You don't just feel hurt, you feel wrong. What scares me most, and maybe what scares you too, isn't one person walking away. It's the fear that every ending is a preview of the rest of your life. That every read but not replied, every you're amazing but, every I'm not in the right place for a relationship is secretly code for no one will ever stay. You don't just cry over them. You cry over the future you're suddenly sure you'll never have. Maybe you've been the friend everyone vents to but no one dates. The safe place for their tears but not their commitment. Maybe you're always the almost person. Almost chosen, almost loved, almost enough. Maybe you've been cheated on or replaced quickly and it carved the sentence "I'm not worth staying for" into your chest. The scary part is how every new disappointment presses on that same line, so the grief feels huge, even when the relationship was short. Once the story "I'm unlovable" settles in, confirmation bias does the rest. Your mind circles every rejection in red and quietly erases anything that doesn't fit. Someone shows care and you say, they're just being nice. A person is interested and you think, they don't really know me yet. It doesn't mean you're dramatic. It just means your brain is trying to protect you from hoping too much. But here's what that case file almost never includes. Context. It rarely remembers that your ex had unhealed trauma, or that your values didn't match, or that both of you were repeating patterns you never learned how to name. It doesn't hold space for the skills no one taught you. How to communicate, how to set boundaries, how to receive love without shrinking. There's nothing wrong with needing to learn those. You're not broken for not knowing. And there's one more thing shaping that evidence every single day. One quiet witness you keep consulting without realizing it. It's in your hand when you can't sleep. It's the feed you scroll when you feel most alone. Your phone, and the world of social media and dating apps, has been whispering its own version of your lovability. In the next part, we're going to open that file too, and ask whose story you've really been believing. So there you are at night, phone lighting up your face in a dark room. The rest of the house quiet. You're lying on your side, one arm around the pillow, because it's the only thing you can actually hold, and your thumb just keeps moving. Engagement photos, anniversary posts, soft videos of someone being kissed on the forehead, two people laughing in a kitchen with warm light and matching mugs. Every caption says some version of the same story. We found each other against all odds. I never thought I'd be loved like this. My person, my forever. You read them while you're alone, while the silence in your own bed feels louder with every scroll. And a tiny voice starts whispering, if love is everywhere, why is it never here? What scares me most is how normal it feels to forget that this is a highlight reel. People post their best days, their filtered faces, their most flattering angles. They share the proposal, not the weeks of doubt. The sunset vacation, not the quiet drive home after a fight. You don't see the lonely nights next to someone who doesn't really understand them, the distance in the same bed, the way two people can feel unchosen while technically together. Your brain doesn't care about that. It just compares. Their front stage against your behind the scenes. Their "we made it" against your "I can't even get a text back." And without asking your permission, it starts building a story. Everyone else is loved, everyone else is chosen, everyone else is moving forward. If they all have it and you don't, the conclusion feels simple. I must be the problem. The hardest part is you don't even notice how often you repeat that. Every time you open an app, every time you see another ring, another soft couple video, another "we survived so much and still chose each other," it presses on the same bruise. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like the only one left unchosen does. Then there are the dating apps, where love is supposed to be easier. You upload a few pictures, write a few lines, and suddenly you're on a digital shelf. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Profiles pass by like products. You're judged in seconds, kept or discarded with a thumb. And you're doing it too, even if you hate that it feels this way. No matches today, no replies this week. Conversations that start with hope and die in the middle of the ordinary. Each tiny silence feels like proof. Proof that you're not attractive enough, not interesting enough, not something enough. It doesn't mean that, but it feels like it does when the numbers are right there on your screen. There's nothing wrong with you for being hurt by that. Almost no nervous system is built to handle constant, quantified feedback on desirability. You're not weak for caring, you're human. As long as your worth is tied to the scroll, the feed will always be the judge, and love will always feel like a test you're failing. But underneath all this comparison, there's a quieter question waiting. If the numbers, the photos, the timelines don't actually decide your lovability, then what does? What does it really mean to be lovable and loved? Beyond looks, status, or perfect pictures? And how do you start believing that about yourself when the screen keeps saying otherwise? So let's answer that question the screen keeps dodging. If love isn't actually decided by abs, achievements, and perfect timing, then what is it decided by? What makes two people move from strangers to almost to you're my person, even on the nights when everything feels fragile and lonely? Most of us were handed the same script. Be hot enough, successful enough, charming enough, and easy enough to handle, and someone will finally choose you. Don't be too emotional, don't be too quiet, don't need too much. The hardest part is how slowly you start to believe it. You look at your life and think, if no one has stayed, it must mean I'm missing whatever everyone else has. But when researchers study what actually pulls people together and keeps them there, the story is softer and much more human. We fall for familiarity, the face we keep seeing, the voice we hear after a hard day, the person who sits next to us often enough that our nervous system stops bracing. We fall for emotional safety, the one who doesn't punish our honesty, who remembers the small things, who is responsive when we reach out instead of disappearing into silence. We fall for shared values more than shared highlight reels. For someone whose idea of a good life rhymes with ours, we fall for humor, not as performance but as relief. The person who can make us exhale when our chest is tight. We fall for the feeling of being truly seen and not corrected. Not I'll love you when you improve, but I love you and I'll grow with you. Looks and novelty can spark that first jolt. They matter for initial attraction. But long-term love is built on emotional availability, reliability, and how two nervous systems fit together. Can you calm each other instead of constantly triggering old hurt? Can you repair after conflict? Do you feel more like yourself with them or less? That's what your body is quietly asking, even when your mind is counting likes. This is why so many people who feel unlovable are actually strong in the exact traits that sustain real love. Empathy, depth, loyalty, the ability to sit with someone's pain without turning away. There's nothing wrong with you for not shining in quick swipe environments. Those spaces reward loudness, novelty, and performance. They almost never reward the slow warmth that makes someone feel safe at night. The scary part is if you believe love is only for the most impressive, you will keep overlooking the qualities in you that are actually deeply lovable. You'll treat your sensitivity, your steadiness, your honesty as proof you're too much or too boring, instead of seeing them as the reason someone will finally exhale and stay. And that whole idea of leagues, it's not an objective truth. It's insecurity, social conditioning, and algorithms arranging people into fake hierarchies so they keep chasing. Attraction is wildly subjective. While one person overlooks, another person is magnetized by. What one person criticizes, another person cherishes. You're not universally unwanted. You've just not been met by the right nervous system yet. But here's what scares me most. Even if you understand all of this, it doesn't mean it will land, as long as your worth is still tied to who does or doesn't choose you. Knowing how love works is one thing. Believing you deserve it even before it arrives is something entirely different. And that's where I have to go next. So a quiet deal gets written inside you. You don't sign it on paper, you sign it in lonely nights and unanswered messages. It sounds something like, once someone finally loves me the way I want, then I'll be allowed to feel okay about myself. Until then, you're on probation. Until then, nothing about you really counts. When that's the contract, love stops being a gift and becomes a judge and jury. Every crush is suddenly a hearing. Every date is evidence. Every breakup feels like a final verdict. You're not just wondering, do they like me? You're asking, do I get to matter now? Or am I still the one who gets left? The question, will anyone ever love me, stops being about timing and turns into, am I fundamentally worth anything at all? The hardest part is how logical it feels when you're inside it. If love equals worth, then being single feels like failure, not circumstance. A Saturday night alone doesn't just mean you didn't have plans, it means you lost. A rejection doesn't just hurt, it becomes proof. Proof that you're too much, or not enough, or secretly broken in a way everyone else can see but you. This deal usually doesn't start with romance. It starts when you're small, long before your first crush. Maybe praise only came when you achieved something, when you were helpful, when you didn't cause trouble. You were loved most when you performed, when you made life easier, when you stayed quiet. Affection arrived with good grades, with being the responsible one, with being the child who never needed comforting. You learned that existing wasn't enough. You had to earn your place. So you grow up and repeat it. You overfunction in relationships. You fix, you please, you shrink. You become the therapist, the planner, the one who always understands. You tolerate mixed signals, raised voices, emotional distance, because at least someone wants you. At least you're not alone in the night with your thoughts. The scary part is how easy it is to call that love, simply because it's attention. There's nothing wrong with wanting love. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen, to have a hand reaching back for yours. It doesn't mean you're needy or weak. It just means you're human. The problem isn't the desire. It's when your entire value hangs from one fragile hook, whether this person or any person chooses you back. Underneath that hook, there's another layer you almost never touch. A kind of quiet, intrinsic worth that exists before anyone texts you goodnight, before anyone decides you're their person. You might not feel it yet, you might not believe it at all, but your nervous system is already built to bond, to give, to receive. That capacity is part of your value, even in the silence. What scares me most is how many people try to build a life entirely around being chosen, and then have nothing to stand on when someone leaves. Building a life that doesn't collapse without a partner isn't about giving up on love. It's about finally having a foundation steady enough to hold it when it arrives. And that's where I have to go next. What it actually looks like to live as if you matter, even before anyone else agrees. Living as if you matter before anyone else agrees sounds beautiful in theory, but in real life it often feels like this strange, endless waiting room. You're technically alive, technically functioning, but it's like real life doesn't start until someone walks in and calls your name. Until then, everything feels temporary, like you're just killing time in the lobby of your own existence. You see it in the way you plan. You tell yourself you'll travel when there's someone to split the hotel with. You'll decorate when there's someone to share the bed. You'll cook real meals when there's someone to eat them. Your nights become placeholders instead of memories. When I'm loved, then I'll travel. When I'm loved, then I'll rest. When I'm loved, then I'll feel at home in my own life. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like your whole life is on pause does. The scary part is how this waiting room mindset makes the question, will anyone ever love me? So much heavier. Because if everything meaningful is saved for later, then every month that passes feels like proof that nothing is happening, that maybe nothing will ever happen. You're not just lonely, you start to feel unchosen by life itself. And when love becomes a switch that turns your life from grayscale to color, of course the silence feels like something is wrong with you. But there's another way to think about it. Instead of building a life that needs to be rescued by love, you build a life that can hold love. A life with friendships that know your stories, interests that light up your brain, routines that make your mornings and nights feel a little less sharp. It doesn't mean you stop wanting a partner. It just means your days are not nothing without one. The hardest part is this can feel like settling for a half-life when you're already lonely. It can feel like you're giving up on being fully chosen. What scares me most is how many gentle, deep-feeling people stay in the waiting room because they think starting without a partner means they've accepted being alone forever. But you're not accepting a loveless life. You're building the exact muscles, self-respect, consistency, openness that make you more resilient when love finally does show up. So you start small. One thing each week that is just for you. A class, a book in the park, a walk at night with music that makes you feel less alone. You invest in a hobby or a skill, not because it will impress someone, but because it makes you feel a little more alive. You deepen one existing friendship with a real conversation instead of another "I'm fine." You create tiny rituals of comfort, a candle before bed, a favorite mug in the morning, that tell your nervous system, I am worth caring for, even now. This isn't about pretending you don't want love or acting like you're above it. As long as you're human, you will want to be chosen. There's nothing wrong with that. This is about refusing to abandon yourself while you wait, about letting your life be in motion so love can join you instead of rescue you. And to move from understanding this to actually living it, we have to talk about healing, not as a vague idea, but as specific ways to tend to the parts of you that still believe you're unlovable. That's where we're going next. So let's slow this down and get very specific. When you're lying there at night and that heavy question shows up, will anyone ever love me? What does the voice that answers actually say? Not the polished version you tell a friend. The raw one. The one that whispers, No one will ever choose you. You're too broken. You're too old. You missed your chance. Notice how absolute it sounds. It doesn't say, I'm scared it might not happen. It says, it will not happen. Full stop. Like it's some kind of prophecy. That's what scares me most about this voice. Not just what it says, but how sure it feels. As if it can see the rest of your life, and it's already decided you'll be alone. But if you listen underneath the certainty, there's usually something younger there. A hurt version of you, still standing in an old moment where someone didn't choose you, or never really saw you, or kept you close but never claimed you. The scary part is, that younger part doesn't know time has passed. It keeps repeating the same conclusion. If they didn't stay, it must mean I'm unlovable. It doesn't mean that's true now. It just means no one has helped that part update the story yet. So instead of trying to shout it down, what if you met it? You're not the voice itself. There is a part of you that believes you're unlovable, yes. But there are also parts of you that still hope, still reach, still care. The proof is that you're here, listening, trying to understand yourself instead of numbing out completely. That hopeful part matters too. You might even try talking to this unlovable part like it's sitting across from you. Ask it, gently, where did you learn to say no one will ever choose you? Was it a parent who was always distracted? A first love who left without explanation? Years of being the friend but never the partner? When did you first start saying, you're too much, or you're not enough? What are you trying to protect me from by convincing me to stop hoping for love? The hardest part is we usually fuse with this voice. We don't say, a part of me thinks I'm unlovable. We say, I am unlovable. We take one scared overprotective part and let it speak for our entire self. And there's nothing wrong with you for doing that. Your brain is wired to avoid hurt. As long as it thinks hope equals pain, it will try to shut hope down. But you're not only that fear. Many people, even people who are partnered, carry a quiet conviction that if their relationship ended, no one else would ever love them. Being chosen once doesn't magically erase this part. It needs something deeper. And once you can see it, this younger, certain, terrified voice, you can start offering it what it never got. Consistent care, clear boundaries, and new experiences that slowly, gently begin to prove it wrong. That's where we're heading next. Healing isn't a spell you cast once. It's not that one late night where you finally cry it all out and wake up somehow free. And I know there's a part of you that still hopes for that. One book, one person, one conversation that finally proves you wrong about being unlovable. The fantasy is that someone will walk in, choose you fully, and their love will erase every night you went to sleep feeling alone. But the hardest part is, that's not how your body learned this story, so that's not how it's going to unlearn it. Your nervous system didn't decide you were unworthy in a single moment. It collected evidence. Again and again you were ignored. Again and again you were left. Again and again you felt like too much or not enough. Slowly, quietly, repetition taught you that love is unstable, that being chosen never lasts, that closeness always costs you something. When a belief is carved by repetition, it can't be replaced by a single insight, no matter how beautiful. Insight is a light turning on in your mind. Your body needs more than light. It needs new patterns. It needs to be shown, not just told. That connection can feel different. That's what healing actually is. Repetition in a new direction. Instead of again and again being dismissed, it becomes again and again being heard. Small, almost boring moments. A therapy session where you confess the thing you're most ashamed of, and the person across from you doesn't flinch, doesn't rush, doesn't tell you you're wrong for feeling this way. They stay. They're warm instead of cold, curious instead of judging. Nothing dramatic happens, but something loosens. A tiny expectation shifts, or a friendship where you finally let the mess show. You talk about the late night spirals, the way you stalk old conversations, the way you still check if they viewed your story. You expect distance, maybe silence. Instead, you get a, I'm still here, and an invite to hang out next week. Or you set a boundary with someone you're afraid to lose, and they don't disappear. They adjust. Your body waits for the punishment that never comes. The scary part is how slow this feels. You want to wake up one morning and just know you're lovable. Instead, it's months of tiny corrections. You might not notice change day to day, but over time your baseline begins to move. The default expectation that people will leave softens into a cautious, unfamiliar hope that maybe they won't. You're not suddenly fearless, you're just slightly less certain that hurt is the only ending. And when you do panic, cling, or shut down, it doesn't mean you failed. It just means an old pathway lit up. Those are the exact moments you get to do something different. Reach out instead of disappearing. Tell the truth instead of pretending you're fine. Pause instead of chasing. Healing is not perfection, it's direction. Because as long as love stays a wish and not a practice, nothing really changes. And that's where we need to go next, into the part no one teaches you, that love isn't just a feeling that finds you, it's a set of skills you were probably never shown. Love is also a skill. That sounds strange at first, because when you're lying awake at night staring at the ceiling, love feels like weather. It just happens to some people and skips others. Some are naturally chosen. Some are naturally unchosen, and you start quietly deciding which one you must be. You look at couples who seem to move so easily together and think, they're just built for this, I'm not. But what if that's not true? What if what you're calling naturally lovable is often just a set of skills that were modeled, practiced, and repeated until they looked like personality? Things like saying, "This hurt me," without turning it into an attack or swallowing it until you disappear. Things like listening with actual curiosity instead of waiting for your turn to defend yourself. There are people who know how to repair after a fight, who can say, "I'm sorry, I see you're hurt, can we try again?" There are people who can set boundaries without burning everything down, and respect other people's boundaries without feeling rejected. There are people who can tolerate real closeness without panicking, and tolerate space without assuming distance means they're being abandoned. These aren't magic traits, they're skills. The hardest part is, if you grew up in a house where no one did this, you don't experience it as skills I was never taught. You experience it as something is wrong with me. Maybe your parents screamed or shut down. Maybe no one apologized. Maybe needs were called drama, or you were told you were too much, too sensitive, too needy. So now, when you struggle to say what you feel or to stay when things get hard, you don't think I'm under-resourced. You think I'm unlovable. But struggling with communication or boundaries doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're doomed to be alone. It just means there are specific muscles that never got the chance to grow. There's nothing wrong with you for not knowing what no one ever showed you. You're not behind. You're not a lost cause. You're someone who wasn't given a map. Think about any language or instrument. At the beginning, your sentences are clumsy, your fingers slip, the sound is off. You don't take that as proof you should never speak or play. You understand it means you're learning. Love works like that too. Awkward conversations, misread signals, even failed relationships are not evidence that you should give up. They're part of how your nervous system learns a different way to be with people. What scares me most is how the belief I'm unlovable cuts this process off before it even starts. If you're convinced no one would want you anyway, why practice expressing needs? Why learn to listen, to repair, to set limits, to stay present? It feels like polishing a house you believe no one will ever visit. But these skills aren't just for some future partner. They change how you move through friendships, how you handle conflict at work, even how you talk to yourself in the quiet of the night. As long as love stays a distant fantasy, you never get to discover that. And the scary part is, the only way to practice these skills is in real connection, with real people, real risk, real chances to be hurt, and also to be held. Which means to answer, will anyone ever love me? You'll have to do the one thing your fear keeps trying to protect you from. You'll have to step out of hiding. So stepping out of hiding doesn't mean throwing yourself into the brightest light and hoping not to burn. It starts in the dimmer rooms of your life, in the quiet places where you already exist. The instinct, especially when you feel unlovable, is to do the opposite, to shrink, to say less, to keep everything important locked away so no one can look too closely and decide you were right about yourself all along. When you've spent years feeling unchosen, hiding feels like protection. If people only see the easy parts, they can't reject the real you. If you never ask for anything, no one can say no. If you never say, "This hurt me," no one can tell you you're overreacting. It makes a strange kind of sense, doesn't it? The less you reveal, the less evidence there is that something is wrong with you. But here's the paradox. The same walls that keep out rejection also keep out love. The silence that feels safe at night is the same silence that stops anyone from actually knowing you. You can't be fully loved while staying mostly hidden. You can be liked, admired, even wanted for pieces of you. But the part of you that's still alone in the dark never gets touched. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is this. What if someone finally sees everything? The history, the need, the moments you're not proud of, and then walks away. The hardest part is that this fear isn't imaginary. People have walked, people haven't stayed. Your nervous system remembers. So of course your body chooses distance over risk. You're not dramatic, you're protecting yourself. This is where graded exposure comes in, not ripping yourself open to everyone, not confessing your deepest wounds on a first date, but taking small, deliberate steps that stretch you without snapping you. Sharing a bit more honestly with a friend instead of saying I'm fine. Joining a group where you don't know anyone and staying through the first awkward half hour. Showing up to an event alone and not leaving at the first wave of panic. Low stakes vulnerability sounds simple on paper. Saying, I'm actually having a hard day. Asking, could you help me with this? Admitting, I'd rather do this instead of always saying, I don't mind, when you do. It doesn't mean you're suddenly needy or selfish. It just means you're letting tiny pieces of your inner world touch the air so they can be met, instead of always managed alone. For a nervous system wired for self-protection, these inches feel like miles. Your heart might race just sending a text that's slightly more honest. You might rehearse a sentence 10 times before you say it out loud. There's nothing wrong with that. Courage here is measured in inches, not miles. In the quiet moment, you stay present instead of shutting down. The scary part is taking these steps without any guarantee. Some people won't respond how you hope. Some will change the subject, minimize, or simply not get it. That will hurt. But each small risk also gives you data. Who leans in? Who stays gentle? Who makes space? And that data slowly rewrites the story that no one will ever choose you once they really know you. Because as you let yourself be seen, something else becomes just as important. Learning that not everyone who looks at you, wants you, or even says they love you is actually good for you. And that discernment, who gets access, and how much, is where we go next. Not everyone who reaches for you is safe to hold. Some nights, when the loneliness is loud and the room is dark and still, almost any hand extended toward you feels like rescue. After years of feeling unchosen, the smallest sign of interest can feel like proof that maybe love hasn't forgotten you after all. You know that rush when someone texts back fast, calls you special, says they've never met anyone like you? When you've been alone for so long, it's intoxicating. Your body relaxes, your hope wakes up, and a part of you whispers, finally, I'm chosen. The hardest part is that hunger is real. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be wanted, but hunger can make you eat what hurts you. Without discernment, you start telling yourself, at least someone wants me, while you overlook what their actions are actually saying. You explain away red flags, inconsistency, the way they disappear for days and come back at night when they're lonely. You tolerate disrespect because the alternative feels like going back to that cold bed and that heavy silence. And slowly, it teaches you that love means enduring pain, that your role is to earn every bit of affection you get. But any attention is not the same as care. Any attraction is not the same as commitment. Any I miss you is not the same as I will show up. People can be drawn to your softness and still mishandle it. They can say you're the best thing that's ever happened to them and still choose not to grow. What scares me most is how easy it is to call that chaos passion when you're afraid of being alone again. Safe love looks quieter than the movies, but it holds. It means respect when you disagree, emotional responsibility when they're hurt instead of punishment or withdrawal, a willingness to repair instead of pretending nothing happened. It means their words and actions match over time, not just on the good days. It means there is space for your needs and boundaries without you being called needy, dramatic, or too much. The scary part is saying no to crumbs when you feel starving. It can feel like you're choosing loneliness on purpose, turning away from the only person who's looking at you. But you're not choosing emptiness. You're choosing not to confuse hurt with love. You're choosing self-respect over temporary relief. It doesn't mean you don't want love. It just means you're done paying for it with your dignity. So you practice pausing. When someone shows interest, you don't only ask, do they like me? You also ask, do I feel safe, seen, and steady around them? Do I like who I become with them? As long as you keep asking those questions, you're not being picky or ungrateful. You're honoring the part of you that has been hurt enough times. And quietly, underneath all of this, the question starts to shift. It moves from, will anyone ever love me, to something even more tender. Can I allow myself to believe I'm worth loving, even before they arrive? That's where we're heading next. So let's pause here for a second right in the middle of this story. We've walked through your childhood rooms, the places where love felt conditional or confusing. We've stood inside old relationships where you gave too much or received almost nothing. We've looked at how social media quietly tells you, night after night, that everyone else is chosen while you're still alone with the silence and the screen. We've talked about attraction, How it isn't just looks or status, but nervous systems and patterns and the way your body learned to brace for hurt. We've separated your worth from being picked, even if your chest still tightens when you see couples in grocery store aisles. We've named skills and discernment, and the quiet power of asking, does this love feel safe for me, instead of how do I become enough for them? And still, underneath all of that, the question might be sitting there, raw and heavy. Will anyone ever love me? Maybe it still feels unanswered. Maybe every attempt at reassurance slides off because it doesn't match your lived experience yet. When people tell you, of course someone will love you, it can sound like they're skipping the part where you've gone years without being chosen. The hardest part is you may never get a guaranteed, time-stamped answer. No one can look you in the eye and say, on this date, at this hour, love will arrive and never leave. Your brain hates that. It wants certainty, a contract, something it can hold at 3 a.m. when the bed feels too big. The scary part is how that uncertainty can start to mean, in your mind, that nothing good is coming. But it doesn't mean that. It just means the story is still being written in real time. So instead of trying to bully yourself into believing, yes, someone will love me, we're going to gently shift the question. What if, alongside, will anyone ever love me? You also asked, how can I live as if my worth isn't on trial, while I'm open to love finding me? Not pretending you don't care, just refusing to let your entire life be a waiting room. What would you do today if you believed you were at least slightly lovable? Not perfect, just not a lost cause. Would you text a friend back, even if you feel awkward? Would you wear the shirt you actually like instead of the one you hope looks safer? Would you let yourself rest without earning it first? How would you treat yourself if you were someone you cared about deeply? Would you speak to yourself the way you do now, or would you soften the edges a little? There's nothing wrong with still feeling lonely, still wanting to be held, still aching when the night gets too quiet. You're not failing at healing because you haven't transcended the longing. You can also ask, what kind of love do I actually want to give and receive? Not in theory, but in the small, real moments. Slow conversations, shared meals, honest apologies, being able to say I'm scared without losing the person. As long as you keep asking what your heart needs, you're already moving toward a different kind of connection. It's okay if part of you is skeptical, or tired, or rolling its eyes at these questions. You don't have to fully believe new stories yet to start acting in alignment with them. Behavior can lead belief. Tiny choices can slowly teach your nervous system that I am not as unlovable as you were taught. And this isn't where I ask you to give up wanting romantic love. We're not abandoning that longing. We're learning to sit beside it with more tenderness for yourself. We'll keep returning to that desire, but from a place that doesn't treat you like a problem to be fixed. In the next sections, we'll move from ideas into practices. Ways to build self-worth that doesn't crumble. Connection skills that make you easier to know. And small real-world experiments where you can feel, in your own body, what it's like to be met. No guarantees, no perfect timelines, just lived moments where you become more and more lovable to yourself and more visible to the people who can actually love you back. That's where I go from here. And then there's the part no one warned you about. You start measuring your progress and love by what your phone says. One quiet night, you open the dating app just to check, and suddenly you're staring at a row of faded conversations, unanswered messages, people who swiped right and then disappeared like you were nothing. It feels less like an app and more like a mirror, and the reflection hurts. You tell yourself you're just curious, just bored, just passing time. But the hardest part is how quickly the numbers start to sound like truth. 3 matches this month, no replies this week. A story you posted that barely anyone reacted to. It doesn't feel like data, it feels like a verdict. If love is real, why is your phone so silent? If you're lovable, why does it look like no one is choosing you? You scroll through other people's feeds and it's like watching a different universe. Couples at dinner, soft hands held in low light, anniversary posts, my person captions. You're alone in your room, lit by a screen, and the comparison is brutal. You don't just feel unchosen, you feel unseeable. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is how slowly this seeps in. You don't stop believing in love. You stop believing any algorithm will ever send it your way. But here's the quiet truth. These systems were never built to measure your worth. Algorithms are designed to keep you looking, not to tell you what you mean. They amplify what's loud, what's constant, what hooks attention. They sort by proximity, timing, swipes, and patterns that say more about who is online at 2 a.m. than about the depth of your heart. Low engagement doesn't mean low lovability. It just means a machine made a guess about what to show to whom and when. Still, the shame spiral is real. You close the app, promise yourself you're done, and then the night gets lonely again and your hand reaches for the same icon. You refresh, you wait, you listen to the digital silence, and it feels personal. Every hour without a notification feels like proof. Every scene with no answer feels like confirmation that your worst fear is right. Maybe no one will ever stay. You're not dramatic for feeling that. Your brain reads rejection like physical hurt. Of course it stings. The scary part is how easily you forget there's nothing wrong with you outside of these metrics. When an app becomes the judge, your own inner sense of worth goes quiet. So this is where another experiment begins. What if you slowly reclaimed your own internal metrics of value? Not how many matches, but how honestly you showed up. Not how many likes, but how kind you were to yourself when no one was watching. Do you really want your future in love decided by the design of a feed or by the person you're becoming when the phone is face down? Because next, we're going to talk about what it means to build a life that can hold love instead of just chase its notifications. Because even when the phone is face down, the comparisons aren't. They live in your mind now. You can feel completely alone in your room and still be surrounded by other people's love stories, replaying like a highlight reel you were never invited into. You know the scroll by heart. Engagement photos with golden hour lighting. Soft launch relationships where it's just a hand, a shoulder, a second coffee cup. Anniversary posts with paragraphs about finding my person. And somewhere between the third proposal and the seventh, I said yes. You don't just think, that's sweet. You quietly decide, I'm the one left behind. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like simple math. Everyone else is being chosen. You're not. The hardest part is how private that decision is. No one sees you pause on the picture of your friend's ring a little too long. No one hears the way your chest sinks when another "we made it through everything together" caption shows up on a night you're just trying to make it through your own silence. On the outside, you double tap and type, "so happy for you." On the inside, you whisper, "what's wrong with me?" I've come to understand what this is. You feel like there's a bright light on your unchosen life, while everyone else is too busy looking perfect. But what you're really seeing is curation. Their best angles, their best days, their best sentences about love. You're comparing your unfiltered, messy reality to their edited proof that they are wanted. You see their couple's trip. You don't see the fight in the airport. You see the proposal. You don't see the 3-year stretch where they wondered if they would ever get here. And slowly a belief forms. Love is easy for everyone else. They just meet someone. It just happens. They don't have to overthink every text or heal from old hurt before they're allowed to be loved. You start to tell yourself, if it's this hard for me, it must mean I'm broken. Loneliness becomes less about being alone and more about feeling like the exception to a rule everyone else got handed at birth. What scares me most is how convincing that story can sound. You don't stop believing in love, you stop believing it wants you. But it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you're seeing only one side of the story. You are not the exception to love. You are the exception to how honestly people talk about how hard and messy love actually is. As long as everyone keeps posting the polished version, you will keep thinking you're the only one struggling. You're not. The couples who make it aren't the ones who never doubt. They're the ones who learn how to stay, repair, and tell the truth about the work. And that's where we're going next. Not the fantasy of effortless love, but the real skills and inner shifts that let you be met fully without pretending you're anything other than who you are. Not the fantasy of effortless love, but the real skills and inner shifts. That's the turn. And this is usually where your mind quietly protests, because somewhere deep down, you're still holding on to a different story. That one day, someone will just see you across a room, understand you without words, and finally, pull you out of the lonely nights without you having to risk anything. In that story, you don't have to say, "this is what hurts me." You don't have to admit, "I'm scared you'll leave if you see all of me." They just know. They read the silence, they decode the half smiles, they sense the history in your eyes. Being chosen like that sounds like safety. No awkward conversations, no rejection, no moments where you're sitting on your bed at night wondering if you shared too much. Just instant recognition and permanent rescue. Where did you learn that? A lot of it comes from the way love is shown to you. Movies, books, even short clips online repeat the same pattern. The spark, the glance, the sudden pull between two people who barely know each other. You see the chemistry, the kiss in the rain, the grand gesture at the airport. You almost never see the slow work of building emotional safety, of learning how someone's childhood shaped their triggers, of saying when you go quiet, I feel alone, and staying in the room together. The hardest part is how convincing that fantasy becomes when you're already feeling unchosen. When you've been the one who texted first, who cared more, who stayed longer than you should have, it's tempting to believe the solution is to finally be picked by someone perfect, so you never have to feel that imbalance again. But real love doesn't work like a talent show. It doesn't mean lining up and hoping you're sparkly enough to be selected. It means two people slowly choosing each other again and again as they actually are. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is the quiet belief underneath. If someone truly knew my thoughts, my history, my insecurities, they would leave. So you try to be lovable from a distance. You curate, you hold back, you share just enough to be interesting, but not enough to feel exposed. The scary part is that this distance keeps confirming your fear. Because if no one really knows you, no one can really stay for you. They can only stay for the version you're performing. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen. That longing is human. But being loved is different. Real love is less about being picked out of a crowd, and more about being gradually known, seen, and stayed with over time. It just means letting someone move closer inch by inch, letting them see the nights you overthink, the parts of your story you wish were different, and noticing that they're still there in the morning. Being alone right now doesn't mean you're failing at this. You're not behind. You're not broken for wanting the movie version. As long as you're willing to trade the fantasy of being magically chosen for the reality of being slowly known, you open the door to a different kind of hope. And the next question becomes, how do you actually let yourself be known without feeling like you're handing someone a weapon? You'd think love starts with the moment, the spark, the look across the room that finally ends the lonely nights where you're hugging a pillow and wondering what's wrong with you. But most of the time, real love doesn't arrive like that. It arrives quietly, almost forgettably, through small safe moments that keep repeating until suddenly you realize, I'm not alone in this. What actually pulls people closer isn't perfection. It's emotional safety. It's the steady feeling that when you reach out, someone usually reaches back. Not always with fireworks, not always with the perfect words, but with consistency. The hardest part is you've been taught to chase intensity instead of safety, chemistry instead of care, butterflies instead of calm. But long term, the nervous system doesn't fall in love with drama. It falls in love with what feels safe to come home to. Think about the people you've slowly grown attached to. The coworker you started indifferent to, but now you miss when they're not there. The friend you didn't notice at first, but who kept showing up, checking in, remembering small details. That's familiarity. Research calls it repeated exposure, but really it just means the more safe moments you share with someone, the more your guard softens. You begin to trust that their presence isn't random. You begin to hope it's not temporary. The scary part is how often we overlook this. You might believe you need to be more attractive, more successful, more impressive to be chosen. Social media makes it worse. You see highlight reels of couples, filtered faces, big gestures, and you decide there's nothing wrong with love. There's something wrong with you. But long-term relationship studies keep finding the same thing. Emotional responsiveness, reliability, and shared values predict satisfaction far more than looks or status. You don't stay because someone is the hottest person you've ever met. You stay because you can tell them when you're hurt without being punished. You stay because they answer the late-night text more often than they ignore it. You stay because when you're vulnerable, they don't use it as a weapon. They hold it like something that matters. What scares me most is how many gentle people think they missed the line where these traits were handed out. As if reliability, kindness, and emotional presence are a personality lottery you lost. They're not. They're skills. They're patterns you can practice. Listening without rushing to fix. Saying, I'm here, and meaning it. Keeping your word in small things so your presence feels solid in big things. You're not too broken to learn this. You're not behind. I've learned that even people with anxious or avoidant patterns can become more secure through new experiences of being responded to, and by learning to respond differently themselves. It doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid again. It just means your fear won't be driving the car. And as long as love feels like a mysterious fate instead of a set of learnable skills, you'll keep asking, what's wrong with me? Instead of the question that actually changes things. What kind of connection am I quietly training myself for? There's another question hiding underneath it. Do I let anyone see me when I'm not performing? Think about how you move through a date, a situationship, even a friendship. You're funny enough that the silence never feels awkward. You're chill enough that you never cause drama. You're impressive enough that they'd be stupid not to choose you. You're low maintenance enough that you never seem like a burden. On the outside, it looks like ease. On the inside, it's work. Constant, quiet work. You become the person who always asks, "How was your day?" and barely mentions your own. You laugh at jokes that sting a little. You say, "It's fine, don't worry," when it's not fine and you are worried. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being this unseen version of yourself in company does. Because you're there, but you're not really there. The scary part is this performance does keep you safe in a way. If they only ever meet your brightest, smoothest, most agreeable self, then when they drift away, you can tell yourself it wasn't really you they rejected. It was the character, the mask. And that hurts, but it also protects you from the deeper hurt of, they saw all of me and still left. But here's the cost. When people say they love you, you don't believe them. How could you? They're loving the curated version, the one who never needs too much, never cries first, never says, "That hurt me." You stay lonely even when you're not alone, because love can't land on a self that's always slightly out of reach. The hardest part is how logical this feels when you trace it back. Maybe as a kid, love arrived when you were quiet, helpful, easy. Maybe your feelings were too much, your needs were a lot, your joy was too loud. Maybe past partners pulled away the moment you showed anger, jealousy, or fear, so your nervous system learned a rule. Acceptance is conditional. Safety means shrinking. Being chosen means disappearing. There's nothing wrong with you for learning that rule. It doesn't mean you're fake. It just means you adapted to hurt you, didn't know how to stop. And as long as that rule runs in the background, you'll keep asking why you feel unlovable while never actually letting anyone love the real you. So what do you do with that? You don't rip the mask off overnight. You experiment. Tiny, low-stakes moments where you let a crack show. Saying, "Honestly, I'm a little anxious right now," instead of, "Haha, I'm good." Admitting, "I didn't like that joke," to a friend you mostly agree with. Letting your voice shake and not apologizing for it. These are small, but they matter. They're rehearsals for being seen. Prove to your body that honesty doesn't always end in abandonment, that imperfection doesn't always mean you'll be left unchosen in the night. And slowly, you start building a different kind of connection skill. Not how to keep people interested, but how to stay present as yourself when someone actually comes close. Because the question isn't only, will anyone ever love me? It's also, when love stands in front of me, will I be able to stand there as myself long enough to feel it? And this is where self-worth quietly slips into the room, even if you never invited it. Because under the question, will I be able to stand there as myself? There's another one you almost never say out loud. If they see me and don't choose me, does that mean I'm not enough? A lot of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that being chosen romantically is the final stamp of approval. Maybe you grew up watching adults praise the cousin who got engaged first, or hearing that your value would make sense once you had a partner. Maybe every movie ended with love as the reward for becoming better, prettier, more successful. Over time, the story sinks in. When someone finally chooses you, it means you're no longer the lonely one on the outside. It means you made it. The scary part is how this fusion turns every tiny interaction into a test. A crush doesn't text back for a day, and it doesn't feel like a scheduling issue, it feels like proof. You get ghosted, and it doesn't mean a stranger failed to communicate, it means your worth just got quietly voted down. One person loses interest, and suddenly it's not, this connection wasn't right, it's, there's something wrong with me that love keeps noticing. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen does. When your worth and your relationship status are tangled, dating stops being exploration and starts feeling like trial by fire. Every first date is a verdict. Every "I'm not ready for something serious" sounds like I'm not ready for you, specifically because you're lacking something I can't even name. Your nervous system reacts as if your whole life is on the line, because in your mind it is. If they stay, you can breathe. If they leave, you collapse. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen, but when being chosen is the only way you feel real, love becomes a hostage situation. The hardest part is imagining a life where I am still worthy on the nights when no one is texting you back, where a quiet phone doesn't automatically mean a quiet future, where you can sit in the silence of your room, feel that familiar ache, and not turn it into a story about being unlovable. You don't stop wanting love. You just stop letting the absence of it rewrite who you are. What scares me most, for myself and for you, is how rare it is to build worth that doesn't depend on a good morning message. But that's the work now. a self-worth foundation that love can rest on, instead of demanding that love be the foundation itself. You start small. You notice the parts of your life that don't disappear when someone leaves. Your kindness, your depth, your ability to sit with another person's hurt and not run. You treat those as real, even when no one is there to applaud them. Being alone right now doesn't mean you failed the test. It just means the story is still being written, and you're learning how to stand as a whole person in the meantime. Because as long as love is the only thing holding you up, every loss will feel like a collapse. But if you let your own worth hold you first, love can become what it was always meant to be. Not the ground under your feet, but the hand you choose to hold while you walk. And once you see that difference, the question shifts again. It's no longer only, will anyone ever love me? It becomes, what kind of love actually fits the person I am when I'm standing on my own 2 feet? When you start standing on your own 2 feet, another fear slips in. If I make peace with being single, am I secretly telling the universe I don't need love? If I build a life that feels okay without anyone, does that mean no one will ever come? This is the part almost no one explains. You're scared that acceptance is the same as giving up, that if you stop aching out loud, love will forget you exist. The hardest part is you've been taught that longing is proof you haven't quit. So you hold on to the ache like it's a contract with hope. But aching isn't what brings love closer. It's just what makes your nights heavier. Think of it this way. When you build friendships, routines, interests, and gentle habits of self-care, you're not boarding up the windows. You're laying down a softer floor for love to land on. It doesn't mean you're closing the door. It just means you're not asking another human being to be the only thing keeping you from collapsing. There's a difference between wanting love from emptiness and wanting love from grounding. Emptiness says, if no one chooses me, I am nothing. Grounding says, I already have a life, and love would be a beautiful addition. One clings. The other can receive. You don't stop wanting, you just stop begging your own heart to disappear until someone else finally sees it. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is how normal emptiness can start to feel. You get used to nights where your whole sense of worth hangs on a message that never comes. You refresh conversations, scroll through couples online, and it hurts because their love looks like proof that you're the one left unchosen. But you're not the absence of a partner. You're a person whose life has more rooms than romance. So what does building that life actually look like? It can be as small as a weekly walk with one friend, where you both tell the truth instead of pretending you're fine. Joining a class or group where people see you regularly enough to notice when you're gone. Starting a night ritual that makes the silence less sharp. A book, a warm drink, a playlist that feels like a hand on your back instead of a spotlight on your loneliness. There is nothing wrong with wanting someone to share all of that with. As long as you remember, you're allowed to start before they arrive. Research keeps finding that people who feel rooted in their own routines, values, and connections are more likely to create stable, satisfying relationships when love does show up. Not because they're less lonely, but because they're less willing to abandon themselves. You're not choosing between a full life and a full-hearted love. You're practicing holding both. And as you do, another question begins to form. Not just will anyone ever love me, but how can I let myself be seen as I am in the life I'm already living? And the first place that question is answered isn't in some future relationship. It's in the life you're already living with the people you keep telling yourself don't count. Because the hardest part is, your brain has decided that only one kind of love means you're finally chosen. Romantic, intense, obvious. Everything else, it quietly files under nice but not real proof. So your friend who messages you when you go quiet for a few days, asking, hey, are you okay? That becomes nothing. Your coworker who remembers you hate morning meetings and saves you a seat by the window? Nothing. Your sibling who sends you a video they know will make you laugh, just to break up your night? Still nothing. You're not doing this because you're ungrateful or cold. You're doing it because your hurt brain is running on all or nothing rules. If it's not someone choosing you as their person, if it doesn't end in a relationship status, it doesn't mean you're lovable. It just means people are being kind, and so you stay lonely in a life that is actually full of small signals that you matter. Think about it. Who checks in when you disappear? Who worries if you don't text back for a day? Who sends you songs, tags you in posts, keeps inviting you even when you say no a few times? These are not accidents. These are people choosing you in quiet ways, saving you a seat, remembering your coffee order, asking how the appointment went, noticing you've been more tired lately. Love doesn't always arrive with flowers in a speech. Sometimes it looks like, text me when you get home so I know you're safe. What scares me most is how this all or nothing thinking deepens the emptiness you already feel. Because now you're not just lonely at night, you're lonely in the middle of actual care. Surrounded, but unregistered. Held, but unconvinced. You don't stop having love around you, you just stop letting it count. There's nothing wrong with wanting romantic love. You're not dramatic for craving someone to hold you in the dark and say, I choose you. This isn't about pretending friendship or family is enough so you stop hoping. It's about telling the truth. I am not utterly unlovable while you wait. Both can be real at the same time. You can want more and still acknowledge what already is. So here's a gentle practice. For 1 week, don't force gratitude, don't lecture yourself. Just notice. Each time someone remembers a detail about you, checks in, invites you, worries about you on a late night drive, write it down in your notes app or a small notebook. 1 line at a time. Not to prove you shouldn't feel lonely, but to prove your existence lands somewhere. As long as you only recognize love in one form, you'll keep asking if anyone will ever love you. When you start seeing the love that's already here, a different question appears. Not just who will choose me, but how do I let myself receive what's already trying to reach me? Sometimes the way you protect yourself from love is quiet. It looks reasonable, it sounds mature. You're not swearing off relationships, you're just refining your standards. You tell yourself you're done settling, done being hurt, done wasting nights in silence next to someone who doesn't really see you. So you make a list. They communicate perfectly. They never get defensive. They always know what to say. They text back fast, but not too fast. They've done all their healing. They know exactly what they want. They never get insecure, never pull away, never confuse you. From the first date, you want certainty, safety, guarantee. No mixed signals, no doubts, no flaws. You don't want love, you want a promise that you will never feel that old hurt again. On paper, it sounds like self-respect. After all the ways you've been overlooked or betrayed, of course you don't want to repeat the same wrong story. Maybe you stayed with someone who kept you unchosen in the background, or you begged for crumbs of attention from a person who always had an excuse. Maybe you watched your parents' love collapse and promised yourself you would never end up in that kind of night, so you swung the other way. You built a shield out of standards. The hardest part is that some of those standards are healthy. Wanting kindness, basic consistency, emotional availability, shared values. That's not asking for too much. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone who actually shows up. Research on long-term love keeps saying the same thing. It's not looks or status that keep people together. It's responsiveness, communication, and how safe you feel with each other. Wanting that safety doesn't mean you're picky. It just means you finally know what hurt you. But then there are the other rules. The ones that say, if they hesitate once, I'm gone. If they don't text exactly how I need, they're emotionally unavailable. If I don't feel instant certainty, it's not real. Those aren't boundaries, they're escape routes. They keep you from ever having to sit in the uncomfortable middle place where love is possible, but not guaranteed. Where you could be chosen, or you could be hurt again. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is that letting love in means accepting that real people will confuse you sometimes. They will say the wrong thing. They will need repair. The scary part is loosening the shield just enough to let someone be human near you, without abandoning the core needs you bled to discover. How do you know what to keep and what to soften? One way is to ask, does this standard protect my value or my fear? They must respect my no, protects your value. They must never trigger my insecurity, protects your fear. Boundaries say, if you keep hurting me, I will step back. Protective fantasies say, if there's any risk you could hurt me, I won't even try. You're not asked to drop your guard and walk naked into the fire. You're asked to notice where your standards are a shield that keeps you safe, and where they've quietly become a cage that keeps you alone. As long as every imperfect moment means they're wrong for me, you'll never stay long enough to see if love could grow. In the next part, we'll talk about how to stay carefully in that uncertain middle without losing yourself again. And here's where it gets even more confusing. Because when you finally do let the cage open a little, you don't walk toward the people who are steady and present. You find yourself pulled, almost magnetically, toward the ones who are distant, half in, already taken, or always not ready. You tell yourself you're just unlucky. But why does the same kind of person keep showing up in a different body? Think about it. The hot and cold texter who is sweet at night and gone by morning. The friend who flirts when they're lonely, then remembers their partner the next day. The almost relationship that feels like love in private and like nothing in public. These patterns don't just happen. They feel familiar. They feel like home in a way that hurts. But still, somehow feels safer than the quiet of being alone. The scary part is how old this actually is. Long before dating apps and late-night spirals, you learned what love meant by how it showed up around you. If love in your childhood was busy, distracted, unpredictable, or only warm when you achieved something, your nervous system learned that this is what love feels like: inconsistent, conditional, a little bit out of reach. So when someone shows up and simply chooses you without confusion, your body doesn't always relax. Sometimes it panics. You don't think, this is healthy. You think, something's wrong. Why do they like me this much? What are they missing? You're not broken for feeling that. There's nothing wrong with you for being more comfortable chasing than receiving. Chasing gives you a role. It gives you a script. If they're distant, you can try harder. If they're taken, you never have to fully risk being chosen, because there's always a built-in reason it can't work. What scares me most is how safe unavailability can feel when you secretly believe you're unlovable. If they never fully choose you, then their leaving doesn't mean you were seen and rejected. It just means the timing was off, or they were damaged, or life got in the way. It doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means you never had to stand there, fully visible, and hear a clear no. So you keep picking people who can't pick you. Not because you love pain, but because it protects you from the deepest kind of hurt: being truly known and still left behind. As long as love stays almost, you never have to find out what happens when it's real. The hardest part is interrupting this without blaming yourself. The first step is noticing the early red flags you usually romanticize. The delayed replies that give you a rush when they finally answer. The "I'm just bad at communication" line. The constant talk about how they're not ready while still reaching for your warmth at night. Instead of asking, "How do I make them stay?" you start asking, "What feels strangely familiar about this?" Name it. This feels like my father's silence. This feels like my mother's mood swings. This feels like proving I'm worth staying for. When you can name the echo, you create a tiny gap between past and present. In that gap, you can experiment with something terrifyingly new. Choosing the person who texts back, who makes plans in daylight, who shows up when they say they will. At first, their consistency might feel boring, or even wrong. That's not because there's no love there. It's because your body is used to chaos. In the next part, we'll talk about how to stay with that discomfort long enough to find out what love feels like when it doesn't hurt to be chosen. Staying with that discomfort is where another belief usually shows up. The one that whispers, "See, you're still too messed up for this. You should fix yourself first. Then maybe someone will love you." And suddenly, it's not just about learning what safe love feels like. It's about earning the right to feel it at all. If you listen closely, you probably have an internal checklist. Be more confident, more healed, more successful, more emotionally stable. Then you'll finally be lovable. Then you'll finally be chosen in the daylight instead of just in the night. The hardest part is how reasonable it sounds. Because growth is good, therapy is good, wanting to be better is good. But somewhere along the way, "I want to grow" quietly turned into "I'm not allowed to be loved until I'm finished." What scares me most is how this belief keeps love permanently in the future. There's always one more thing you have to work on, one more wound you have to heal, one more habit you have to break before you're allowed to rest in someone's arms without apologizing for existing. You don't notice how cruel it is because you aim it at yourself. You make love into a prize for perfection instead of something that can hold you while you're still in pieces. Think about it. If love is always waiting on your next achievement, how could you ever arrive? Healing isn't a straight line. I've learned that most of us cycle through old patterns when we're stressed or afraid. That doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're human. As long as you're alive, there will be some unfinished part of you, some place that still feels lonely, some story that still hurts when you touch it. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be more grounded before you share your life. There's nothing wrong with taking time alone to break patterns that keep getting you hurt. There's nothing wrong with saying, "I want to bring my best self into love." But love is not a graduation ceremony. It doesn't mean you walk across a stage one day fully healed and finally get handed a partner like a diploma. A healthier reframe is this: you don't need to be finished to be loved. You need to be willing. Willing to be honest about where you are. Willing to be responsible for your impact when your unhealed places spill over. Willing to stay open to growth instead of hiding behind, "This is just how I am." You're not asking for someone to fix you. You're inviting someone to walk with you while you keep doing your work. The scary part is letting someone see the parts you still judge. The hopeful part is realizing that the right person won't confuse your healing with a warning sign. In the next section, we'll talk about how to tell the difference between someone who can hold your becoming and someone who only wants the polished version of you that doesn't actually exist. So when we talk about someone who can hold your becoming instead of your polished version, it can sound like luck. Like one day the universe just drops a person in your lap who magically understands you, and you finally feel that thing everyone else keeps calling chemistry. But what if a lot of what we call chemistry is actually skills? Quiet, learnable skills you were maybe never shown. Think about the people you felt safest with, even outside of love. They probably did a few simple things. They looked at you when you spoke. They asked what you meant instead of assuming. They didn't punish you for feeling too much. That's not an accident. Underneath the spark, there's attunement, curiosity, and the ability to stay steady when emotions rise. The hardest part is, if you grew up with chaos, neglect, or emotional distance, you might assume you're just bad at relationships, when really, no one ever modeled these skills for you. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not missing some secret gene that makes people lovable. If your parents shut down when you cried, or your ex used your honesty against you, your nervous system learned that closeness equals danger. It doesn't mean you're doomed to be alone. It just means your body is trying to protect you with the only map it has. So what do these skills actually look like? One is asking real questions. Not the small talk you rehearse to fill the silence, but gentle, specific questions that show you care. What was that like for you? How did that hurt? What do you need when you're having a bad night? When you ask and then really listen, without rushing to fix or impress, you create the kind of safety that feels like chemistry on the other side. Another is sharing your own inner world in small doses. Not oversharing everything at once to prove you're honest, and not staying completely closed to prove you're strong. Just choosing one tiny truth at a time. I get quiet when I'm scared you'll leave, or I feel lonely even when I'm not alone. The scary part is that this feels like handing someone a match near all your old hurt. But there's nothing wrong with needing to be known to feel loved. You also have to learn to tolerate awkwardness, the pauses, the misread texts, the moments where you say the vulnerable thing and the other person needs time to respond. Awkward doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes it just means two nervous systems are trying to learn a new dance. And eventually, there's repairing after conflict. Not pretending nothing happened, and not exploding and disappearing. Saying, that hurt me, or I'm sorry I shut down. I was scared. And staying long enough to hear their side too. Long-term love doesn't stay because there's no conflict. It stays because repair is possible. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is believing that if love hasn't worked yet, it never will. But every one of these skills is learnable, slowly, over time. As long as you're willing to practice with friends, with family, with yourself, you're already changing the conditions around you. You're making connections safer, for you and for them. In the next section, we'll talk about what it actually feels like in your body when love is safe, and how to tell that feeling, apart from the rush of finally being chosen. Sometimes it feels like everyone else got a secret class you missed. They talk about first loves, first kisses, first everythings like homework they turned in years ago. You're sitting there in the back row of your own life, staring at a blank page, wondering how you're this old and still feel new at love. The hardest part is the humiliation. Not just being alone, but feeling like you're the only one who doesn't know the rules. Friends swap stories about dating apps, exes, awkward but funny nights. You're quiet, or you laugh along, but inside you're thinking, I don't even know how to get to the part where it goes wrong. I've barely gotten to the part where it starts. It doesn't mean you're broken. It just means your timeline is different. Nobody tells you how common that is, being a late bloomer, having only one relationship that hurt more than it helped, having experience that's mostly confusion, or half love, or people who kept you a secret. You look around and assume everyone else is further ahead, but you don't see the nights they cried because someone disappeared, or the way they still don't know how to say what they need without fear. What scares me most, for you and for me, is how shame about inexperience can quietly run the whole show. You start pretending you know more than you do. You nod like you're comfortable when you're not, or you swing the other way and avoid everything. Dates, flirting, moments that could become something. Not because you don't want love, but because every situation feels like a test you're guaranteed to fail. The scary part is how that shame steals your chance to learn. You can't practice what you never allow yourself to try. You can't feel safer with touch if you always freeze or escape. You can't build connection skills if you only rehearse conversations in your head at night and never let them breathe in the open air with another person. There's nothing wrong with being a beginner. You're not behind. You're not unchosen because you're inexperienced. As long as you keep telling yourself you should already know, You'll keep grading yourself instead of growing. What if you let yourself be new at this? What if every message, every date, every honest "I'm nervous"? Is it okay if we go slow? Was practice not a final exam? Beginner love is allowed to ask questions. It's allowed to say, "I've never done this before, can we talk about it?" It's allowed to move slowly, to pause, to check in with your own body and say, does this feel safe or just familiar hurt? Being new doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you're learning. In the next section, we'll slow down even more. We'll listen to what your body does around someone who might love you, and how to tell the difference between the rush of finally being chosen and the quieter feeling of actually being safe. So for a moment, instead of sprinting ahead to forever, stay here with something smaller. Not, will anyone ever love me for the rest of my life? But, can I let in one tiny moment of connection today without running from it? The hardest part is I keep trying to solve a lifelong ache with one perfect person, instead of practicing with the tiny chances that already brushed past us in the quiet. You don't have to overhaul your entire life tonight. You don't have to wake up tomorrow suddenly fearless, suddenly open, suddenly ready to hand your whole heart to a stranger. You can start with almost nothing. A look, a word, a breath you don't swallow back. Being alone right now doesn't mean you're broken. It just means your nervous system has learned to brace for hurt, and you're teaching it something new, one small experiment at a time. Think of these as micro experiments instead of personality changes. You're not becoming a different person. You're gathering data. Today, maybe the experiment is eye contact. When the barista hands you your drink, you actually look up, meet their eyes for half a second longer than usual, and say thank you. Not flirty, just present. Notice what your body does. Do your shoulders tense? Does your chest feel tight? Do you want to escape the second it feels like someone really sees you? Another day, the experiment might be saying yes to a low-stakes invite. The coworker who asks if you want to grab lunch. The friend who suggests a movie night. You don't have to stay until midnight. You don't have to be the most interesting person in the room. You just have to show up for the first 15 minutes and see how it feels to not choose isolation by default. It doesn't mean you're suddenly social. It just means you're giving connection a chance to find you somewhere other than your bed at night. There's also that text you keep drafting and deleting. Hey, it was nice talking to you. I've been thinking about what you said. I miss you. The scary part is how much meaning you load onto one send button, as if one message proves you're either lovable or pathetic. What if it's just another experiment? You send it, you breathe, you let the response, or their silence, be information, not a verdict on your worth. And then there is the hardest experiment of all, practicing receiving, a compliment you don't argue with. Someone offering to carry something heavy and you say, that would help, thank you, instead of, no, it's fine, I've got it. A friend checking in and you answer honestly instead of, I'm good, nothing's wrong, when you're clearly not. You're not needy for letting care land. You're human. What scares me most, personally, is how quickly I want to deflect love the moment it gets close. Maybe you do that too. Someone says, you're really thoughtful, and you reply, not really, I just, and shrink the moment down to nothing. These experiments ask you to pause there, to say, thank you, and let the warmth sting a little, because being seen when you're used to feeling unchosen can hurt before it heals. Remember, this is data gathering, not self-judgment. Each yes, each eye contact, each received kindness is a tiny proof that connection is possible, that your body can survive both interest and rejection. You're training your system to learn. I can reach out and not collapse. I can be noticed and not disappear. As long as you stay curious instead of cruel to yourself, every outcome teaches you something about how love might move toward you. In the next section, we'll slow these experiments down even further. We'll listen to the signals underneath them, the racing heart, the numbness, the sudden urge to run, and start telling which sensations are old hurt, and which ones might actually mean you're finally, quietly, becoming ready to be loved. Sometimes, even on the good days, that question still slips in at night. You can be texting someone new, laughing with friends, feeling almost okay, and then the silence hits when you're finally alone, and your brain whispers, but will anyone ever really love me? Not just talk to you, not just keep you company, really see you and still stay. The hardest part is, you might be waiting for that question to disappear before you let yourself try. You tell yourself, once I stop feeling this scared, then I'll date, then I'll open up, then I'll believe someone could choose me. It sounds reasonable, it sounds safe, but years can pass like that. You're protecting yourself from hurt, and at the same time, You're protecting yourself from being held. What scares me most, even in my own life, is how convincing that waiting can feel. You call it healing, you call it working on yourself, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a quiet freeze. You stay in your routines, you watch other people fall in love, and you keep telling yourself you're not ready yet. The fear doesn't leave, it just hardens into a story about being unlovable. So what if the goal isn't to make the fear vanish, but to learn how to walk with it? Courage isn't the absence of panic in your chest. Courage is sending the text even while your hands shake, saying I had a nice time tonight, even when your brain is screaming that you sounded wrong. It's moving gently in steps small enough that your nervous system doesn't feel like it's being pushed off a cliff. In real life, that looks very ordinary. It's letting yourself stay 5 more minutes in a conversation, instead of rushing away. It's saying yes to coffee, not because you're sure this person is the one, but because you're practicing being seen. It's telling a friend, I feel lonely, and staying in the room when they don't run. You might still lie awake some nights wondering if you'll ever be chosen, but now those nights are woven between actual moments of connection, not just imagined ones. There's nothing wrong with still hearing the old question. You're not failing at healing because doubt shows up in the dark. Being alone right now doesn't mean you'll always be alone. It doesn't mean you're doomed to be unchosen. It just means that, so far, life has asked you to build more of yourself before you share it. Over time, if you keep practicing these tiny risks, something shifts. The question, will anyone ever love me, doesn't always leave, but it loses its power. It becomes one voice in the room instead of the only one, because now you have evidence, the friend who checked on you, the person who listened, the small moments where you chose yourself instead of begging to be chosen. The scary part is, this doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow accumulation of proof. In the next section, we'll look at how to notice that proof in your body. The loosening in your chest, the steadier breath, the way certain people make your nervous system feel just a little less on guard, and how to let those signals, not just your fear, guide who you move toward. And then, in the middle of all that quiet body awareness work, someone throws in, you just need to love yourself first. Like that sentence is going to hold you on the nights you feel completely alone. You hear it everywhere, don't you? When you admit you're lonely, when you whisper, will anyone ever love me? Into the dark, people answer with posters. Just love yourself. It'll happen when you stop looking. It sounds wise from the outside. Inside, it can feel like being told your hurt is your fault. Because the hardest part is, you're not asking for a bubble bath. You're asking if you're fundamentally unlovable. You're asking why it seems so easy for other people to be chosen while you keep going home to an empty bed, and someone hands you a quote instead of a hand on your shoulder. It doesn't mean they don't care. It just means they don't know what else to say. We've turned self-love into a performance. Candles, skincare, long walks with the perfect playlist. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Sometimes those small rituals are the only soft thing in a hard week. But real self-regard shows up in much quieter places. The way you talk to yourself when they don't text back. The way you treat your body when you feel rejected. The way you decide whether one person's silence means I am nothing. What scares me most is how easily love yourself first gets twisted into a rule. Like there's a secret checklist you have to complete before anyone is allowed to love you. As if only people with perfect confidence, healed attachment, and flawless boundaries get chosen. That's simply not true. People with messy, anxious, avoidant, tangled up self-esteem are loved every single day. Being loved doesn't require you to be finished. It requires you to be human. Self-love is not a gate you have to pass through before love is allowed to reach you. It's more like the tone of voice you use with yourself while you're still waiting at the gate. Slowly, imperfectly, shifting from self-attack to self-support, especially when you feel unchosen. The scary part is, that shift is so small it almost looks like nothing from the outside. Not a grand declaration, just tiny moments where, instead of saying, of course they didn't stay, there's something wrong with me, you try, this hurts, and I'm still worthy of love. As long as you keep practicing that, love becomes easier to receive when it does arrive, but it is never the condition for being worthy of it. You're not selfish for wanting someone while you're still working on yourself. You can crave a hand to hold and still be learning how to hold your own. Those longings can sit side by side. The wish to be chosen, and the wish to not abandon yourself again. If you want something practical, start here. Once a day, notice one moment you usually criticize yourself. Maybe you catch your reflection and hear, I'm disgusting. Maybe you see a couple at night and think, No one will ever love me like that. Don't try to flip it into forced positivity. Just soften it a little. I don't like how I look today, and I'm trying. I feel lonely, and that doesn't mean I'm unlovable. 1 degree kinder. That's all. In the next part, we'll talk about what it means to build a life that doesn't collapse without a partner. Not because you've stopped wanting love, but because your whole world doesn't hang on one person finally staying. So let's talk about that part of you that's already living in a future that hasn't happened yet. The version of you who wakes up next to someone, cooks with them at night, shares every holiday, every quiet Sunday, every hard phone call, and the way it almost physically hurts to realize that person is still just imagined. When your whole life is secretly built around a partner who doesn't exist yet, every talking stage feels high stakes. It's not just we stopped texting, it's there goes the person I was going to move in with, build with, finally not be lonely with. One unmatched message, and suddenly the house in your head collapses. You're not just losing a chat, you're losing the future you were hanging your hope on. The hardest part is how fragile that makes everything feel. One dry reply, one slow fade, and it's like your whole plan for not being alone anymore is slipping through your fingers. You start thinking, if this doesn't work, nothing will. And that's when, will anyone ever love me, stops being a question and starts feeling like a sentence. But what if your life didn't have to balance on one missing piece? Imagine it instead like a building held up by several pillars: relationships, purpose, creativity, rest, growth. If one shakes, you feel it, you hurt, you grieve. But the whole structure doesn't fall. That's what a multi-pillar life means. Not that you stop wanting love, not that you pretend you're fine with being unchosen forever. It just means your survival, your joy, your basic okayness don't depend on one person finally choosing you. Because there's nothing wrong with wanting a partner. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone to hold at night, someone to text when something small and beautiful happens. The scary part is when a hypothetical partner becomes responsible for saving you from every hard feeling, from boredom, from emptiness, from your own thoughts. That's too much weight for any human to carry, even a good one. So you start looking at other anchors. Friendships where you feel seen without performing. Hobbies that make time disappear. Learning something new that reminds you your mind is still alive. Moving your body in ways that feel kind instead of punishing. Some kind of spiritual or reflective practice. Even if it's just 10 minutes of honest journaling in the silence before bed. Small acts of contribution, checking on a friend, volunteering once a month, sharing something that helped you, so your love has somewhere to go even before a partner arrives. What scares me most, for myself and for you, is how easy it is to think this is giving up on love. It's not. It doesn't mean you'll never be held. It doesn't mean you're closing your heart. It just means you're not waiting to start your life until someone else joins it. And the quiet secret is, people are often more drawn to you when you have roots in your own life. When you're less likely to cling from panic and more able to choose from peace, you feel safer, more open, more present. If you want something practical, try this. Sketch 1 week. Nothing fancy, just make sure there's at least one thing for connection, one for joy, one for growth, and one for rest. Connection might be a call with a friend. Joy could be reading a chapter of a book you love. Growth might be a podcast, a class, a new recipe. Rest could be going to bed 30 minutes earlier or taking a slow walk without your phone. Tiny, almost embarrassingly small steps, as long as you keep them real. And still, I know, there's a quiet grief in building all of this without the person you wish you were sharing it with. You can fill your days and still feel that empty side of the bed at night. In the next part, we're going to sit with that grief. Not fix it, not rush it, just finally name what it means to keep living and growing when the love you want hasn't arrived yet. And what that silence is really trying to tell you. There's a particular kind of ache that shows up on days that are supposed to feel special. Your birthday, when you blow out candles and pretend the wish isn't about love. New Year's Eve, when the countdown gets loud and you suddenly feel more alone than the rest of the year combined. Holidays where the photos are families, couples, and then you, holding a drink, smiling a little too hard. You're not crying over an actual breakup. You're grieving something that never technically existed. An empty passenger seat on long drives. A plus, one line left blank on invitations. The version of this age you imagined, where someone was there in the photos and in the quiet after. It can feel embarrassing, almost dramatic, to mourn a relationship that was only ever in your head. But your nervous system doesn't care about technicalities. It doesn't only grieve what was. It grieves what was expected, what was promised by movies, and family questions. and the younger you who circled imaginary wedding dates in their mind. The scary part is how real that invisible loss can feel. Every time another year passes and you're still unchosen, something inside you whispers, I thought we'd be somewhere else by now. You see engagement posts, baby announcements, people complaining about the very love you're begging the universe for, and a mix of sadness and anger rises. You feel envy you don't want to admit, exhaustion from clapping for everyone else's milestones, while your own feels smaller, quieter. None of that means you're bitter or broken. It doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means you're human, and you've been carrying hope for a long time without much evidence. What hurts most isn't always the grief itself. The hardest part is the judgment you stack on top of it. I shouldn't be this upset. Other people have real problems. There's nothing wrong with being single, so why am I crying in the bathroom at my friend's wedding? Grief moves in waves, not in straight lines. Some days you're fine, even grateful. Then a random Tuesday night, an empty bed, a song from 10 years ago, and suddenly you're underwater again. You wonder, am I going backwards? Why am I still here? You're not going backwards, you're going through it. So what if you honored that instead of shaming it? One simple way is a quiet ritual. You sit down, maybe at night when the house is still, and you write a letter. Not to some future partner, but to the version of you who was so sure you'd be partnered by now. Or to the imaginary relationship itself, the one you thought you'd have, with the trips you planned, the holidays you pictured, the ordinary mornings you never got. You tell them what actually happened. You thank them for keeping hope alive. You let yourself say, I'm so sorry it didn't turn out the way you thought. As you feel the sadness rise, instead of grabbing your phone or scrolling until you're numb, you practice staying. Slow your breathing and count it. Look around and name 5 things you can see. 4 you can touch. Hold something comforting, a blanket, a pillow, your own hand. You won't drown in this feeling, even if it feels like it might swallow you for a minute. As long as you let the wave move through, it will pass. And when it does, there's a little more space inside. Space not just for, will anyone ever love me, but for a softer, braver question. If love does come, how do I want to be loved? That's where we're going next. So when that wave finally loosens its grip, when the night quiets down and your chest isn't burning as much, you're left with that softer question. Not will anyone ever love me, but if love does come, how do I want to be loved? It feels small at first, almost like wishful thinking, but it's not. It's you quietly reaching for your power again, because will anyone ever love me puts you on trial. It makes you sit in front of some invisible jury, waiting to see if you're chosen or left unchosen, as if love is a verdict and you're just standing there hoping you're not found lacking. The hardest part is how passive that feels. You're not deciding, you're being decided about. You're not a person with needs, you're a product waiting to see if someone buys you. When you change the question to, if love did arrive, how would I want it to feel, look, and move through my life? Something shifts. You stop staring at the door and start looking around the room of your own life. You start asking what kind of love could sit on your couch, walk through your mornings, fit into your nights without shrinking you. So imagine it. Not the face, not the height, not the aesthetic. Imagine the qualities. Emotional safety where you can say, I'm scared, and the person doesn't make you feel wrong for it. Playfulness, where you can be silly and soft and there's room for lightness, not just heavy talks. Mutual effort, where texts aren't one-sided, plans aren't always on you, and you don't have to beg to feel important. Shared values that go beyond hobbies, how you handle money, how you treat people, what love means to both of you. Conflict that doesn't turn into war, but into repair. Raised voices that come back down, apologies that mean something, the courage to say, I hurt you, I see it, I want to fix it. And space for individuality, where you can still be alone sometimes, still have your own friends, your own dreams, without it being a threat. What scares me most is how many people never ask for this. They chase the feeling of being chosen, the rush of finally not being alone, and end up accepting relationships that don't match their deeper needs at all. Being wanted becomes the only criteria, and it doesn't mean you're shallow or desperate. It just means no one taught you to ask, does this love actually fit me? So here's something you can do. Take a page and write about one ordinary day with a partner where you feel deeply at ease. Morning to night? Don't describe their body, describe yours. How does your chest feel when they text? How does your stomach feel when you disagree? How quiet is your mind when you fall asleep next to them? When you get clear on how you want to be loved, you start to notice different things. You're pulled less toward chaos and more toward consistency. You show up on dates a little more honest, a little less performative. You're slower to explain away red flags because now you have something to measure them against. And once you know that, once you've named the way you want love to move through your life, another question appears in the doorway. Not will anyone ever love me, but am I actually willing to let someone see me enough to love me like that? That's where this gets real. So you stand in that doorway with the question echoing, and suddenly another layer appears. If someone did walk toward you with the kind of love you say you want, would they even meet you? Or just a version of you you've learned to perform? At night, when the house is quiet and the silence feels heavier, you can feel the gap between who you are and who you present widening. Because most of us don't walk into dating as ourselves. We walk in as a role. Always agreeable, always interesting. Never too needy, never too messy, never asking for too much. You laugh at jokes that don't land. You say, I'm easy, I don't mind, when you actually do. You swallow the hurt when they cancel. You smooth over the wrong comment. You make sure you're chosen by being as little trouble as possible. The scary part is, the more you perform, the less loved you feel, even when someone stays. Their affection lands on the mask. Their compliments stick to the version of you that never cries, never says no, never gets angry. And somewhere inside, a quiet belief hardens. If they saw the rest of me, they'd leave. So every like, every you're amazing, doesn't mean what you need it to mean. It doesn't mean I see you. It just means I like the show. Where did you learn that you had to be a show to be loved? For a lot of people, it started long before dating. Maybe as a child you were too sensitive, too loud, too quiet, too emotional. Maybe when you were excited, someone rolled their eyes. When you were sad, they withdrew. When you needed comfort, you got shame instead. Love felt conditional. Be less, be more, be different. And your nervous system learned a simple rule. Authenticity is dangerous. So now, as an adult, you manage impressions with the precision of survival. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be polite, considerate, or to put your best foot forward. That's part of how humans connect. But the hardest part is noticing when impression management quietly turns into self-erasure. When I want to be kind becomes I won't have needs. When I want them to feel comfortable becomes I'll disappear so they stay. You're not being mature then, you're abandoning yourself. What would it look like to experiment with being seen? Just a little. Not ripping your heart open on the first date, but soft, small risks. Saying, actually, I'd prefer the earlier movie. Admitting, I'm a bit nervous right now. Letting yourself say, that hurt my feelings, instead of laughing it off. Sharing one honest opinion instead of nodding along. These are tiny acts on the outside, but inside they say, my needs get to exist. Will everyone like it? No. Letting yourself be seen will sometimes lead to rejection. Someone might pull back when you stop being endlessly accommodating. That will hurt, but it doesn't mean you were wrong to show up. It just means they were only available for the mask. This is how you filter for people who can actually love the real you, by giving them a real you to respond to. And yet, even when you decide to try, something strange can happen. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race, you suddenly feel an urge to cancel, to pick a fight, to disappear. It's like your whole body revolts against being seen. Why does your own nervous system treat closeness like a threat? And how do you stop it from quietly sabotaging every almost love that comes near? Sometimes, it shows up in the smallest, strangest ways. You finally meet someone who texts back, who seems steady, who looks at you like you're actually worth choosing, and suddenly, you feel nothing. The butterflies vanish. The attraction dulls. You catch yourself thinking, I guess I was wrong. I don't actually like them. And yet, a week ago, you were overanalyzing every message, wide awake at night replaying their voice. Or it goes the opposite way. They say one slightly off thing, answer a bit slower, seem distracted, and your chest floods with heat. You pick a fight over a tiny comment. You demand reassurance, read their silence as rejection, send 3 follow-ups because the first one didn't land. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being almost chosen does. It's feeling love within reach, and watching yourself grip so tightly that the other person starts to pull away. Sometimes you flip between both. One day you're clinging, the next you're cold. You cancel dates last minute. You test them by going quiet just to see if they'll chase you, then feel hurt when they don't. From the outside, it might look like you're indecisive, dramatic, or too much. Inside, it feels like survival. The scary part is how automatic it is. Your body reacts before your mind has time to make sense. There's nothing wrong with you for this. You're not broken. You're not secretly trying to ruin every chance at love. What's happening is usually older than this person in front of you. If love has meant criticism, abandonment, or chaos, your nervous system learned that closeness is dangerous. So when someone comes close now, your whole body scans for threat. A delayed reply doesn't mean much logically, but your chest reads it as, "Here we go again?" A kind message doesn't mean safety. It means, don't relax, they'll change. Attachment research has names for these patterns, but you don't need labels to feel them. Sometimes you go into anxious activation, chasing, over-explaining, checking your phone like it's oxygen. Sometimes you disappear into avoidant shutdown, numb, distant, suddenly busy, convincing yourself you're better off alone. Sometimes you spin between the two so fast it makes you dizzy. It doesn't mean you're impossible to love. It just means your body hasn't experienced enough steady love to trust it yet. The hardest part is your nervous system thinks it's helping. It tests people relentlessly, or it escapes before they can hurt you, because that's what kept you safe before. So instead of shaming yourself for running, cleaning, or picking fights, you can start with a small pause. When you feel the urge to cancel, to stalk their typing bubble, to send the angry text, ask, what is my nervous system trying to protect me from right now? Not what's wrong with me, but what am I afraid this will turn into? Then give your body a moment to come back to the room you're actually in. Look around and name a few things you can see. Feel the ground under your feet, place a hand on your chest or your stomach, and lengthen your exhale, even by 2 seconds. If you're overwhelmed, it's okay to step away from the conversation for a minute. Get some air, drink water, let the wave pass before you react. You're not avoiding love by doing this. You're learning to stay. As long as you keep pretending you're fine, you'll keep acting these fears out alone. In the next part, we'll talk about something braver. How to gently name these patterns with someone you're getting close to, so connection doesn't have to be a secret battle between your hope and your hurt. You can feel it in your chest the moment things start to get close. The messages get more frequent, the nights feel less empty, and instead of relaxing, your body tightens like it's waiting for bad news. You want to be known, but the idea of actually letting someone see the parts that feel too much makes your stomach drop. This is the dilemma no one really prepares you for. If you hide your fears, you feel fake and alone, like you're performing a calmer version of yourself, just to stay chosen. But if you pour everything out too fast, if you talk about every abandonment, every night of crying on the floor, you worry they'll see you as broken and quietly back away. The hardest part is it feels like there's no safe option. Stay silent and hurt, or speak and risk losing the little hope you've built. So it helps to name the difference between dumping and sharing. Dumping is when you unload everything at once because you're terrified they'll leave and you want reassurance right now. Gradual disclosure is different. It's letting someone into your inner world one room at a time, as trust actually grows, not as fear demands. You're not withholding, you're pacing. You're letting your nervous system and theirs breathe. You don't have to say nothing, and you don't have to say everything. You can start with language that's honest but grounded. Like, sometimes when I start to like someone, I get anxious and overthink. I'm working on it, but if I seem a bit on edge, that's why. Or, I've been hurt before, so closeness can feel scary at first. I want to be here, I just might need a little patience. It doesn't mean you're asking them to fix you. It just means you're letting them know the map. Timing matters. You don't need to share your entire trauma history on date 2. You also don't have to pretend you're totally chill if your chest is pounding and you can't sleep at night. The scary part is how easy it is to swing between extremes. Either you swallow everything until you explode, or you bleed out your whole story to someone whose name you barely know. As long as you remember that your pace is allowed, you can choose moments that feel spacious, not rushed, to open up. And then, there's their response. The right people won't respond with perfection, but with curiosity and care. They might say thank you for telling me, or ask what helps when you're anxious. Their reaction is data, not a verdict on your worth. If they dismiss you, minimize you, or use your honesty against you later, that doesn't mean you shared wrong. There's nothing wrong with wanting love and safety at the same time. Before and after these conversations, you can quietly tell yourself, my feelings make sense. I'm learning. I'm not too much. Self-validation softens the impact, so you're not depending entirely on their face, their tone, their next message to decide if you're allowed to feel okay. You become the steady ground you stand on while you experiment with being seen. Over time, as you practice this kind of gentle honesty, you start to notice patterns. Who leans in when you share and who pulls away? who only wants the easy parts of you, and who can sit with the hurt without making it about them. And then a harder question appears in the quiet. If you keep speaking your truth, why do you still find yourself drawn to people who can't really love you back? If you look back, you can probably trace the same outline in different faces. The person who texts just enough to keep your hope alive, but disappears when you need them. The one who says, "I'm not ready for anything serious," while still reaching for you at night. The crush who lights up around you, then posts pictures with someone else. Different stories, same ache. You don't usually fall for the one who is steady, clear, and available. You fall for the almost, the distant, the complicated. The person whose love always seems just out of reach, like if you were a little more patient, a little less needy, they'd finally choose you. And every time when it doesn't work, you don't just feel rejected by them, you feel rejected by love itself. The hardest part is how familiar it feels. Chaos doesn't just show up as drama, it shows up as chemistry. If you grew up with love that was inconsistent, warm one moment, cold the next, your body learned that this is what connection means. You'll learn to listen for footsteps in the hallway, to study moods, to earn affection by being quiet, helpful, perfect. So now, when someone is unpredictable, a part of you lights up. Not because you like being hurt, but because your nervous system whispers, "This is home." The scary part is that inconsistency starts to feel like proof. If you have to work for every bit of closeness, it confirms the story that love is something you win, not something you're given. When they pull away, you don't think they're unavailable. You think, "I messed up." When they come back, it doesn't mean they're safe. It just means your hope gets reset and the cycle tightens around you. I've come to understand this pattern, but you don't need the term to know the feeling. You keep finding new people to play old roles. The emotionally shut down partner who never asks how you really are. The already taken person you convince yourself is your soulmate. The hot and cold friend who loves you deeply in private but keeps you unchosen in public. You stay because some quiet part of you believes that if you can finally make this kind of person stay, it will rewrite every time someone didn't. But chasing unavailability keeps the question, will anyone ever love me painfully alive? As long as you keep choosing people who are unlikely to offer a steady yes, you never actually get to find out what it's like to be consistently loved. You just keep collecting evidence that you're the problem. So it helps to pause and ask, what feels familiar about the people I'm drawn to? Is it their kindness or their distance? What do I tell myself it would mean about me if they finally chose me? That I'm finally enough? Finally not broken? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be chosen, but when one person's yes is supposed to fix every old no, their power over you becomes enormous. Shifting this pattern is slow and uncomfortable. Healthy interest can feel boring at first, suspicious, even undeserved. When someone texts back reliably, you might feel less chemistry and more confusion. When they show up without you begging, your mind might start looking for what's wrong with them, or what's wrong with you for not feeling that familiar rush. You're not broken for feeling that way. It doesn't mean you're doomed to chase almost forever. It just means your system is used to a different kind of love, and safety doesn't yet register as exciting. The question isn't, why am I like this, so much as, what was I taught to call love? Because something subtle starts to shift when you notice that pattern in real time. When someone actually shows up consistently for you, and instead of running, you get curious. And that's where we're going next. What happens inside you when love doesn't leave, and how you can start responding differently when for once, it stays. When love doesn't leave, the room suddenly feels too bright. You're so used to the night, to the silence after double texts and unanswered calls, that a steady presence almost stings your eyes. Someone texts back when they say they will. They remember the small things you mentioned half asleep. They don't disappear for days to make you chase them. And instead of relaxing, your body tenses. It should feel good, right? Being chosen in a way that doesn't hurt doesn't make you guess. But when you've been trained on distance and confusion, consistency feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. You catch yourself thinking, what's their angle? When is the switch going to flip? There's nothing wrong with those questions. They're how your nervous system has tried to keep you safe. Still, they can make real care feel like a trap you need to escape. The hardest part is not believing in theory that healthy love exists. The hardest part is letting your body catch up to that belief. Your chest has learned that calm means boredom, that boredom means abandonment is coming, and that you need to manufacture a spark or you'll be left alone again. So you pick at their flaws. You test them. You pull away right when things get close, just to see if they'll follow. Intermittent affection wired you this way. The hot and cold person, the almost relationship, The parent who was warm one night and distant the next. Your brain got hooked on the high of unpredictable love, the rush of finally getting a message after hours of hurt, the relief when they chose you for one more day. It felt intense, like a movie. But it also kept you anxious, unsteady, never sure if you were enough. Consistent care is quieter. It doesn't flood you with adrenaline, it lets you sleep. It means shared breakfasts, simple check-ins. Knowing that I'm here actually means something tomorrow. It doesn't mean there's no passion, it just means your system can rest. Long term, that safety is what your body and mind are starving for, even if your habits still reach for chaos. So what do you do when steadiness scares you? Start by noticing the urge to run, to pick them apart, to scroll for someone more exciting. Name it gently. This is my safety reflex. Ask yourself, what if I stay 5% longer in this moment? 5 more minutes on the call? 1 more honest text instead of a dry reply. You're not forcing trust, you're stretching it. Then, practice small acts of reciprocal vulnerability. Share 1 extra detail about your day. Say, I appreciated that you checked on me earlier. Whisper a need you usually swallow. Could you text me when you get home? It helps me feel calm. Watch how they respond over time, not just once. Let their consistency be data, not a debt you owe. Trusting steady love doesn't mean ignoring red flags. It doesn't mean explaining away disrespect because you're working on your issues. It just means allowing yourself to believe good behavior is real while you keep observing. As long as their words and actions keep matching, you're allowed to slowly lean in. And as you do, something deeper has to shift too. Because if love stays, you can't keep telling the same story about being the unchosen one. The scary part is next. Updating who you believe you are in relationships, and what it means when someone actually loves you back. So this is where it gets uncomfortable. It's one thing to watch someone show up for you. It's another thing to let that change the story you've been holding in your chest for years. On the nights when you're alone with the silence, that old story feels safer, even if it hurts. I'm the one people almost choose. I'm the one love keeps skipping. It's familiar. Familiar doesn't mean true. Because repeated hurt doesn't just sit in your memory. It starts writing sentences about who you are. The crush who never looked back at you becomes, I'm not the type people fall for. The partner who left without really explaining becomes, I ruin everything when someone really knows me. The friend who slowly stopped replying becomes, I'm forgettable once the novelty wears off. You don't just remember what happened. You decide what it means about you. The hardest part is how real those meanings feel. Your brain doesn't store them as random thoughts. It stores them as proof. Every rejection, every ghosting, every half-love lights up the same parts of your mind that process physical pain. So of course the story feels sharp. Of course you say, look, this keeps happening. It can't be an accident. You're not dramatic. You're hurting. But hurt has a way of editing out anything that doesn't match it. What scares me most, personally, is how quietly that editing happens. You start saying, I'm unlovable, instead of, I've had experiences that made love feel out of reach. One sounds like a fixed sentence. The other sounds like a working draft. And that's what your identity in love actually is. Not a verdict, a draft. Not, this is what I am, but this is what I've learned so far, and I'm still learning. If you want something practical, try this. Think of 3 painful love moments. The one-sided crush you poured your heart into, the relationship that ended without closure, the situationship where you kept waiting to be chosen and never were. For each one, write down what story you quietly took from it about yourself. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I'm always second choice. Then ask gently, is this the only possible meaning? Is it the whole story or just the loudest part? Then add what your pain usually forgets. The teacher who noticed you were off and stayed after class. The friend who checked in every night during your breakup. The person who said, I feel so safe with you, even if they didn't stay forever. These don't erase the hurt, but they are also real. They are counter evidence your old story never cites. Rewriting your story doesn't mean pretending the bad chapters didn't happen. It just means refusing to let the worst pages name the entire book. You're not a tragedy just because some chapters are dark. As long as you keep your story as a draft, there is room for new characters, new kinds of love, new ways of being met. And as that inner story softens, something subtle shifts. The way you walk into a room, the way you look at someone new, the way you let them look back. What happens when you start meeting people from that softer place instead of from, I'm the unchosen one? That's where we're going next. When your inner story softens, the world doesn't change overnight. The rooms are the same, the nights are the same, the silence is the same. But something in you is slightly less sure that you're the unchosen one. And that tiny shift is where real-world experiments start to matter. Because beliefs like I'm unlovable aren't kept alive only by thoughts. They're kept alive by staying away. By not going to the gathering, by leaving the message unread, by avoiding the class, the group, the conversation where someone might actually see you and prove your belief wrong. Or, just as frightening, prove it right. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is how avoidance feels safe, while it quietly keeps you lonely. So we do something different, not brutal exposure, not forcing yourself into crowded rooms and make your body shut down. Think of it as exposure with kindness. You gently place yourself in small, low-stakes moments with other humans, and instead of attacking yourself the whole time, you practice staying on your own side. That might look like joining a small group built around something you already like, so there's at least one familiar thread to hold. A book club, a hiking group, a language class. It might be sending a simple friendly message. Hey, I thought of you when I saw this, and then letting that be enough. It might be a brief conversation with a coworker who feels safe, or saying yes to a low-pressure coffee date where the goal is not to be chosen, but just to be present. The hardest part is remembering what the goal really is. You're not auditioning for love in every interaction. You're not trying to convince someone you're worth staying for. You're gathering evidence. Evidence that you can be around others without collapsing into shame, without performing a version of yourself you secretly hate, without disappearing into the background to avoid hurt. It doesn't mean you won't feel awkward. It just means awkwardness isn't proof that there's something wrong with you. To make this gentle and real, you can create a tiny plan. Once a week, choose one exposure that feels slightly uncomfortable, but not overwhelming. Name it in advance. This week, I'll stay 5 extra minutes after class and ask one person a question. Or, I'll reply honestly when a friend asks how I am. Then also decide how you'll comfort yourself afterward. A walk at night, a warm shower. Writing down 3 things you did well instead of everything you think you did wrong. Some weeks, it will sting. Someone will be distracted, or cold, or just not your person. The scary part is how quickly your brain wants to turn that into a verdict. See? This is why no one will ever love me. But you're not a verdict. You're a person learning. One awkward moment doesn't mean never try again. It means this was data, not destiny. As you collect these small brave exposures, something else appears. Space between moments. The waiting after a message. The quiet after a date. The not knowing of what does this mean. That in-between can feel almost louder than rejection. And that's where we go next. Into the skills that help you stand in that uncertainty without abandoning yourself. So you end up here, in between. Not quite alone, not quite together. Talking every day, sending good morning and good night messages, sharing stories you don't tell anyone else, maybe even sharing a bed sometimes. There's touch, there's laughter, there's that soft rush of hope when their name lights up your phone. But when someone asks, so, what are you two? You freeze because you honestly don't know. This is the almost relationship. Close enough to feel it, vague enough to doubt it. You're investing time, emotion, pieces of your heart, but there's no clear label, no shared agreement, no promise that they're choosing you and only you. And the hardest part is how it inflames that old fear. If they really wanted you, wouldn't they have claimed you by now? Does this in between mean you're special? Or does it just mean you're convenient? For some people, this ambiguity feels safer. No label means less responsibility, fewer expectations, less chance of being the one who hurts or is hurt. If you lean avoidant, the gray zone can feel like breathing room. You get connection without the weight of commitment. But if you lean anxious, the same space can feel like torture. Every pause in the conversation becomes a question. Every slow reply feels like proof you're unchosen again. You don't just wonder what the relationship means, you start wondering what you mean. Your body usually knows before your mind admits it. Tight chest when they take hours to answer. Stomach drop when they post but don't text you back. That buzzing, restless energy at night when you're scrolling, trying to read between lines that aren't even there. The scary part is how quickly you can abandon yourself here. Saying yes when you want to say no, staying up late to be available, pretending you're fine with seeing where it goes, while your insides are begging for clarity. This is where grounding becomes an act of self-respect. Pause long enough to notice. What is my body saying right now? Name the fear out loud, even if it feels dramatic. I'm scared they don't really want me. I'm scared I'm asking for too much. Then ask, not how do I keep them, but are my actions matching my values? or just my panic. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you stop letting fear quietly run the whole relationship. When your emotional investment is high, clarity is kindness to both of you. That might mean a gentle, steady conversation. I really enjoy what we have, and I'm starting to feel more attached. I'd like to understand what you're looking for so I can take care of myself too. Or, labels aside, are you seeing other people? I need to know what I'm standing in. What scares me most, personally, is how often we avoid these words to protect the hope that's already hurting us. You can't control their answer. They might say they're not ready, they like things casual. They don't want to ruin it by defining it. That will sting. It might even crack open that old belief that you're somehow wrong or too much. But their capacity, or lack of it, is information, not a verdict on your worth. You're not unlovable because someone won't commit. You're just standing in front of a person whose limits don't match your needs. Walking away from an ambiguity that is slowly draining you isn't failure. It's a quiet way of telling yourself, I am worth a yes or a no, not endless maybe. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be clearly chosen. As long as you keep confusing uncertainty with possibility, you'll keep mistaking crumbs for a feast and calling it love. But underneath all of this is a deeper question you might be afraid to ask. If someone finally does choose you, if love really arrives and says yes, it's you, how will you keep from disappearing inside it the way you disappear inside the almosts? If you've been lonely for a long time, the idea of finally being clearly chosen can feel like oxygen after years underwater. You imagine that first night you don't go to bed alone, the first morning you wake up to a real person instead of the glow of your phone, and something in you whispers, I'll do anything not to lose this. That whisper is where disappearing begins. Because when love has felt rare, the temptation is to pour everything into the first person who really stays, to make them the answer to the late night spirals, the cure for every old hurt, the proof that nothing was wrong with you after all. Suddenly your plans bend around theirs. Your free time becomes their time. Your world quietly rearranges itself so they sit in the center. At first, it feels romantic. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen does. So when someone finally chooses you, it can feel almost logical to let friends fade, to cancel hobbies, to soften your opinions so there's less risk of conflict. The scary part is how slowly this over-merging empties you out. You don't notice at first. You just feel safe. But then, a different fear starts to grow underneath the comfort. If this ends, what's left of me? If they walked away tomorrow, would I still recognize my life? Or would there be nothing but silence and a calendar I don't know how to fill? The hardest part is realizing you've built your sense of self around a person who was supposed to be a part of your life, not the whole thing. Healthy love doesn't mean never being apart. It means you can be close without collapsing into each other. It means shared routines and separate ones, inside jokes and individual interests, nights together and nights where you each go do your own thing and come back with new stories. It doesn't mean you love them less. It just means you keep loving yourself too. So you start drawing small, gentle boundaries. You keep 1 or 2 solo routines that are just yours. A weekly walk, a class, a quiet night with a book. You keep nurturing non-romantic connections, even when it would be easier to cancel and stay wrapped up in them. You check in with yourself. What do I want this week? What do I need that isn't about them? You can even build in self-check moments. Ask yourself honestly, if this relationship ended tomorrow, what parts of my life would still feel like mine? Would I still have people to call, places to go, things that light me up when the night feels long again? If the answer scares you, that's not a sign you're ungrateful. It's a sign you've been starving yourself of your own company. You might worry that keeping this separateness is disloyal. That saying, I need a night alone, or I'm going to see my friends, means you don't care enough. But people who truly love you will want you to stay fully yourself, because that's who they chose. You're not hard to love for having a life. You're easier to love when you're not asking one person to be your whole world. And underneath all of this is another fear you almost never say out loud. It's not just, what if they stop loving me? It's, what if they leave, move on, and forget I ever mattered? That fear doesn't start in adulthood. It has roots, old ones. And to really understand why this question, will anyone ever love me, hurts so much, I have to go back to where you first learned what it means to be left. That fear of being forgotten doesn't just live in your head. It shows up in your body. You feel it when you're lying awake at night, staring at the dark, replaying old conversations, and wondering if they can move on like I was nothing. Was I ever real to them at all? It's not just about being left. It's about feeling erased. You think about the trips you planned, the late night calls, the way you softened your voice when they were tired. the version of you that tried so hard to love them well. And when it ends, there's this haunting feeling that all of that gets deleted, like closing a tab on a browser. No archive, no trace, just silence where there used to be a whole world. The hardest part is how familiar that feeling is, because this isn't the first time you felt quietly replaced. Maybe it was a parent who got busy and never noticed how much you shrank to keep the peace. Maybe it was friends who stopped inviting you without ever saying why. Maybe it was someone you were talking to every day who just stopped. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a slow fade that made you question if any of it meant anything. When no one names the impact you had or the hurt you feel, you start to believe a dangerous story, that you can be edited out of people's lives without consequence. The scary part is, once you believe you're erasable, every ending becomes proof. If they can leave, you tell yourself, then I must not have mattered. If they can be happy without me, then maybe I was never that important. But that's not the whole truth. Relationships can end and still be real. Love can be temporary and still be love. It doesn't mean you imagined the connection. It just means the story changed. You don't actually know all the ways you've marked someone, or how your presence softened the night they might never tell you about. Your impact is not fully knowable or containable, even to you. So you start practicing something different, self-witnessing. You write down what you brought to a connection, the care, the honesty, the patience. You name how you grew, what you learned about your needs, the boundaries you finally tried. You become the one who refuses to let your own story disappear just because someone else walked out of it. You create small rituals of closure that don't depend on their response, a letter you don't send, deleting a thread while thanking yourself for how much you tried, a walk where you say, I release you, even if they never apologize. There's nothing wrong with wanting them to see your worth, but you're not required to wait for their acknowledgement to move on. Because underneath the fear of being left and the fear of being erased, something quieter is waiting. A different question about your lovability, one that doesn't start with other people at all, and that's where we're going next. So let's slow it all the way down for a moment. Imagine you're in a small, dim room. No mirrors, no phone, no messages coming in or not coming in. No one to see whether you look okay, whether you seem lovable, whether you'd be chosen. Just you, the soft hum of the night outside, your breathing, and the steady weight of your own heartbeat. If you sit there long enough, the usual noise starts to fade. The replayed conversations, the faces of people who didn't stay, the question, will anyone ever love me? Begins to feel a little thinner around the edges. Underneath it, there is only this, chest rising and falling, lungs filling and emptying, your heart working for you without asking whether you're worthy first. In that space, before any story about being picked or passed over, what if there is a basic, quiet okayness that has always been there? Not a loud confidence, not a perfect self-love, just a small, stubborn aliveness that never stopped, even when no one reflected it back to you. The hardest part is you've been taught to doubt anything that doesn't come with proof. Shame trains your eyes to look outward for that proof. Who texted back, who stayed the night, who chose you publicly, and who kept you in the dark. It whispers that if no one is holding you, something must be wrong with you. But beneath shame, there is something simpler. You're not a failure. You're a human nervous system that wants warmth and safety and understanding. That's it. That's the ground level. What scares me most, for you and for me, is how radical that can feel. To imagine your worth as less negotiable than you were taught. To let it mean that another unanswered message hurts, but it doesn't mean you became less human in the process. The scary part is this shift doesn't erase the loneliness. It just means loneliness is no longer the judge of your value. So, in that imaginary room, try this with me. Gently place a hand on your chest. Feel the warmth under your palm, the small movement of your body with each breath. You don't have to feel anything special. Just notice and silently say, even when I feel unlovable, something in me is still reaching for love. Because there's nothing wrong with that reaching. It's proof you're still here. This isn't a magic cure. The question, will anyone ever love me, will still rise up on quiet nights, in sudden waves, in the spaces where you feel most unchosen. But it can start to land in a softer, more spacious inner landscape, where the question is welcomed, held, and answered more gently. As long as you keep touching this quieter place, you're building the ground from which every future love can grow. Romantic, platonic, even the way you sit with yourself. And from here, we can start to talk about what it really means to let love in. So let's come back to where we started. It's late again. The room is dim. the glow from your phone finally fading after one last scroll through other people's lives. You're lying on your side, maybe hugging a pillow, maybe just staring at the ceiling, and the same sentence rises up in the quiet like it always does. Will anyone ever love me? Remember how it felt then. Sometimes it was full body panic, like your chest was being squeezed and the future was closing in. Sometimes it was a kind of numbness, where you couldn't even cry, you just felt heavy and tired and wrong. Sometimes it was shame, this private belief that if anyone could see the real you, they'd understand why you keep ending up unchosen. And sometimes it was just that quiet ache, the lonely kind that sits beside you in the night and doesn't say anything, it just hurts. Since that first moment, we've walked through so many of the threads woven into that question. We've talked about attachment wounds, how early neglect or inconsistency can wire your nervous system to hear every silence, as rejection and every delay as proof you're unlovable. We've looked at the shame stories you absorbed, being too much, too sensitive, not attractive enough, and how they echo every time someone pulls away. We've named the way social comparison makes it worse. How watching couples laugh in short videos, or seeing engagement photos while you eat alone, can trick your brain into thinking love is everywhere except with you. We've untangled the difference between being unchosen and being unlovable. How timing, geography, and other people's wounds can leave you alone without it meaning there's something fatally wrong with you. So if you notice that, even after all of this, the question is still there. That's not failure. The hardest part is realizing that healing doesn't always erase the voice. Sometimes it just changes its tone. What used to sound like a verdict, no one will ever love you, might now feel more like a scared younger part of you tugging at your sleeve, asking quietly, will someone ever stay? What scares me most, and maybe you too, is how loyal that part is to its old evidence. It remembers every unanswered message, every almost relationship, every night you went to bed feeling like nothing you did was enough. The scary part is, it still thinks those moments define you, but they don't. It doesn't mean you're broken, it just means you were hurt. From here, we're not going to pretend the question disappears. We're not going to force you into false hope or quick fixes. Instead, we're going to learn how to sit beside that question without letting it run your life. How to answer it differently, with more truth and more softness. As long as you can hold that scared part with a little more kindness, there's nothing wrong with you for still wanting love. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're standing at the edge of a new way of relating to love, to others, and to yourself. And next, we'll talk about what it actually looks like to live from that place. So let's name what actually hurts here, because it's not just the fear of being alone at night, scrolling through other people's love and wondering what's wrong with you. It's the way your whole body has been trained over years of small and big moments to expect that love will leave, or that you'll be quietly passed over again. When you were younger, love might have felt inconsistent. A parent who was warm one day and distant the next. A caregiver who showed up physically but not emotionally. Friends who liked you until someone louder walked in. None of that means you were unlovable. It just means your nervous system learned to brace, to read every pause as danger, to hear every silence as, here we go again, I'm not chosen. The hardest part is how ordinary it can look from the outside. You go to work, you laugh at the right times, you say you're fine. But inside, your attachment patterns are running the script. If you lean anxious, every delay in a text feels like proof you're too much. If you lean avoidant, every time someone gets close, you feel a quiet urge to disappear before they see too much. You're not dramatic. You're adapted. There's a difference between the pain of not having the love you want right now and the story that this means you're fundamentally unlovable. Being unchosen in this season hurts. Of course it does. But the scary part is how quickly your mind turns, no one is here tonight, into no one will ever stay, and then into there must be something wrong with me. That story is what sinks you. Under that story live a few familiar lines. I'm too much. You feel every emotion strongly, so you start shrinking, apologizing for needing reassurance, editing your text so you don't sound clingy. I'm not enough. You compare your body, your achievements, your social life, and decide love is a prize you haven't earned. If they really knew me, they'd leave. So you stay half available, half honest, lonely even, while technically not alone. What scares me most is how convincing these beliefs feel when they are actually learned responses, not truths. They grew out of moments where you were overlooked, rejected, or emotionally starved, then repeated until they became the lens you see yourself through. They're habits of interpretation, not evidence. So the real wound isn't that no one will ever love you. The real wound is that some parts of you never learned they were allowed to exist fully and still be chosen. The needy part, the quiet part. The angry, disappointed, hopeful parts. As long as those pieces believe they are too much or not enough, love will feel far away, even when it's near. Next, we'll talk about how you begin teaching those parts a different story, so that being loved doesn't feel like a miracle, but like something you're finally able to let in. Teaching those parts a different story doesn't start with some huge transformation. It quietly started the moment you didn't click away. The moment you let yourself stay with this question, with this hurt. Instead of numbing out or pretending you're fine, you might tell yourself you're just scrolling, just listening, just passing time at night when the silence gets too loud. But staying with something this raw is not passive. It's emotional labor. It's you sitting with the ache of feeling unchosen and still asking, underneath everything, is there hope for me? You don't do that if you're truly gone. You don't do that if love has stopped mattering. The hardest part is you probably minimize this. You think, I'm just desperate, or there's nothing happening, I'm still alone. But there is something happening. You are refusing to fully abandon the part of you that wants to be held. That's not weakness. That's an attachment protest in the best way. A quiet, stubborn refusal to accept that you are unlovable, even if your words say you've given up. Think about it. You could have shut down. You could have decided that everyone is trash, that love is a lie, that you're better off cold. A lot of people do. Instead, you're here, letting your chest tighten, letting old memories surface, letting your eyes sting a little. You are staying present with discomfort. That's a skill. That's one of the exact muscles love requires. Maybe as you've listened, there have been tiny shifts, a sentence that gave you language for a feeling you've carried since childhood, a moment where you thought, wait, maybe it doesn't mean I'm the problem just because they left. A flicker of curiosity about why you attach the way you do, instead of only asking what's wrong with you. These are micro shifts, but they're real. Our patterns can change when we bring awareness, compassion, and new experiences to them. That's what you're doing right now. You're not just consuming words, you're letting them touch the places that usually stay hidden. You're practicing self-awareness. You're building emotional tolerance. You're learning to sit in the question, will anyone ever love me, without letting it define your entire worth. What scares me most for you is not that you feel lonely, it's the idea that you might miss how much strength you're already showing. Because the scary part is, when you've been hurt enough, you start believing that nothing you do matters, but this matters. This slow, quiet turning toward yourself instead of away. These inner movements are not separate from love. They are love's groundwork. The same muscles you're using to stay here, curiosity, honesty, staying with your own pain, are the ones that let you stay with another person's heart one day. Being here doesn't guarantee a timeline. It doesn't mean you won't have more nights that hurt. It just means I am already changing the way you meet yourself. And as long as that keeps happening, the story you tell about whether you can be loved cannot stay the same. Next, we'll look at how to turn this quiet inner work into small outer actions so that the love you're building inside you has real places to land. So we have to start here. No one can promise you how this turns out. Not me, not this, not the happiest couple you know, not even the wisest therapist with all the research in the world. They can tell you what makes love more likely, what helps it stay, what hurts it, but they cannot sign a contract that says, on this date you will finally be chosen. The hardest part is how much you want that contract. Not because you're needy or wrong, but because uncertainty feels like standing in the dark with no hand to hold. You think, if someone could just tell me it's coming, I could breathe, I could be patient, I could stop feeling so lonely at night. But that guarantee doesn't exist. And waiting for it keeps you frozen in a question that was never meant to be answered in one sentence. So instead of trying to solve, will anyone ever love me, once and for all, we shift what the question is to you. Up until now, it's probably felt like a judge's sentence. A cold voice in the back of your mind saying, probably not, look at the evidence. Every rejection, every almost, every breakup becomes proof. The question isn't curious, it's cruel. It doesn't mean you're dramatic, it just means you've been hurt. What if the question became less like a judge and more like a scared child you're learning to care for? When will anyone ever love me shows up, what if you heard it as, I'm terrified of being alone forever. Will you stay with me in this feeling? That doesn't magically fix your life, but it changes the way you meet yourself in the silence. You can practice a small inner shift. When the thought comes, instead of repeating, will anyone ever love me? Ask, How can I be kind to the part of me that's terrified no one will? It's subtle, but it's everything. The first question stares into a future you can't control. The second question turns toward a present you can actually touch. One keeps you begging to be chosen. The other invites you to choose yourself. Here, in this exact breath. You'll still have moments where the old version comes back. At night, when the bed is too big and the pillow feels too small. After another date that fizzles into polite silence. At weddings, when you clap for other people's vows and wonder if love skipped your row. Scrolling through photos of couples on trips, babies in arms, soft captions about soulmates while your chest quietly aches. In those moments, walking with the question differently is already a form of healing. You notice, oh, there you are again, instead of, what's wrong with me? You place a hand on your chest. You breathe. Maybe you whisper, you're not unlovable, you're just scared. It doesn't erase the ache, but it holds it. And as long as you keep doing that, you're not stuck in the same story anymore. You're learning to live with the question instead of under it, to let it be a doorway into care instead of a verdict of lack. Next, we'll talk about how this softer inner posture can slowly shape the choices you make on the outside, the way you date, the way you set boundaries, and the way you let people actually see you, so that love doesn't just stay an idea, but becomes something you can stand in. So before we move into the outer choices, I want to gather the inner ones. Because on the nights when the silence gets loud again, you won't remember every story or example, but you can remember a few truths. Almost like small anchors it can hold when the question, will anyone ever love me, starts to rise in your throat. Truth 1, your fear of being unlovable came from somewhere. It's not proof that you are. Maybe it was a parent who was there in body but not in warmth, or a partner who left without explanation, or years of being the friend people vent to but never choose. Those moments taught your nervous system to expect hurt. The hardest part is you started confusing what happened to you with who you are. This doesn't mean you're broken beyond repair. It just means what was learned can be slowly relearned. Truth 2, attraction and love are not a secret reserved for the beautiful, the loud, or the lucky. Research keeps showing that what actually pulls people close is emotional safety, resonance, and repeated, real contact. It's the person you can exhale around. The one who listens when you're lonely at night, who remembers small details, who shows up again and again. You're not missing some magic trait. You may just be missing spaces where your real self is seen often enough to be felt. Truth 3, building a life that feels like a life doesn't replace romantic love, but it changes how you meet it. When your meaning comes from more than one place, your work, your friends, your quiet rituals, your small joys, you become less fragile and more open. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen does. And a life with multiple threads of connection means that when someone comes, you can invite them in without asking them to hold everything. Truth 4, grieving the love you haven't had yet is not self-pity. It's honesty. It's the tears that finally match the years of pretending you were fine. The scary part is letting yourself feel that emptiness without deciding it will be forever. But there's nothing wrong with crying over the relationship you still hope to have. It doesn't mean you're doomed. It means you're clearing space. Truth 5, you do not have to become a different person to be loved. You're not a project that needs to be completely rebuilt. Only a person learning to be on your own side. As long as you keep moving toward a clearer, kinder version of who you already are, setting boundaries, telling the truth, staying soft where it's safe. I am not moving away from love. You are moving toward the kind that can actually stay. These are the 5 truths I hope follow you into the next chapters, into the next lonely night, into the next almost connection. Next, we'll talk about how to practice them in the real world, where messages go unanswered, dates get awkward, and you're still learning to keep your heart open without leaving yourself behind. So let's make this less abstract, because knowing you deserve love is one thing, but then it's Tuesday night, your phone is face down, the silence is loud, and you still feel completely alone. You don't need a personality overhaul. You need a few small, repeatable things that keep you from disappearing into the old story that you're unlovable. The first practice is inward. Once a day, have a tiny check-in with yourself. It can be when you're brushing your teeth, lying in bed, or staring at your reflection before work. Notice when that "no one will ever love me" voice shows up. Can you name it gently, like, oh, that's my unchosen voice, instead of that's the truth? Then answer it with one sentence of kindness. Just one. You're not wrong for wanting love. You're not behind. It doesn't mean you're unlovable because you're alone right now. The hardest part is you won't believe it at first. Say it anyway. You're teaching your nervous system a new language. Then, one practice for connection. Once a week, choose one low-stakes place where you will show up as yourself on purpose. A class where you're learning something, a local group, a small community online that isn't built around dating. Go there and let at least one person see a little more of you than usual, not your whole life story, just one extra sentence of honesty. Actually, it's been a lonely week. I've been trying to meet new people. What scares me most is how easy it is to hide in plain sight. This isn't about forcing instant friends. It just means you're practicing being visible in rooms where you used to stay invisible. You also need a place for the hurt to go, a grief practice. Set aside a few minutes, maybe once or twice a week, to write or speak about the love you haven't had yet, the dates that never called back, the almost relationships that faded into night, the versions of yourself you gave away to people who didn't stay. Let yourself feel the ache instead of numbing it with scrolling or pretending you don't care. There's nothing wrong with you for grieving something that hasn't happened yet. Your body doesn't know the difference between past pain and imagined rejection. As long as you acknowledge it, it doesn't have to run your choices from the dark. Finally, one gentle exposure practice. Slowly increase your contact with situations where love, or at least connection, is possible. Say yes to one invitation you'd usually turn down. Try a dating app, but with boundaries that protect your energy. Limited time on it. Clear deal breakers, permission to unmatched when you feel disrespected. Or take one existing friendship and deepen it by initiating a call, a walk, a real conversation about how lonely you've been. The scary part is, you might still face silence, or awkwardness, or rejection. But it doesn't mean you were wrong to try. It just means you're collecting real data instead of letting your fears write the whole story. Treat all of this as an experiment, not a test of your worth. You're not failing if it feels messy or slow. In the next part, we'll look at how other people's responses, interest, distance, mixed signals can become information you use to protect your hope, instead of proof that you should give it up. And even when you start using other people's responses as information, there will still be nights where all of that wisdom disappears. You'll be lying there in the dark, phone face down, room full of silence, and suddenly it hits you again like it's the first time. No one will ever love me. I'm broken. I'm behind. I'm the one people pass through, not the one they stay for. The hardest part is how familiar that spiral feels. Your brain has rehearsed it for years, so of course it comes back when you're tired, rejected, or triggered by something small that doesn't feel small at all. A slow reply, a date that fizzles, a friend posting engagement photos when you can't even get a text back. You don't just feel lonely, you feel unchosen, and that's a different kind of hurt. So you need something simple for those nights. Something you can still reach when you feel like you're underwater. Think of it as a 3-step script. Notice, name, nurture. First, notice. You literally say to yourself, I'm spiraling. Not as an insult, but as a signal. The moment you notice, you create a tiny bit of space between you and the story. Then you name it. You say, this is my abandonment story talking. Or, this is the old belief that I'm unlovable. That sentence matters. It doesn't mean the pain disappears, it just means you remember this is a pattern, not a prophecy. You're not your story, you're the one hearing it. And then, nurture. Ask, what does this part of me need right now? Not tomorrow, not in 5 years, right now, in this bed, in this night. Maybe it needs to cry without being rushed. Maybe it needs warmth, or a voice that doesn't call it dramatic, or proof that there's nothing wrong with wanting love this much. If you don't have words in those moments, borrow mine. You can say, of course you're hurting. Of course this feels like proof that you'll always be alone. But it doesn't mean that. It means you were brave enough to hope again, and that hope got disappointed. That would hurt anyone. You are not unlovable. You are in pain. Tonight my job isn't to solve my whole life. It's just to be kind to myself in this one night. Then commit to one tiny soothing action, not 10. 1. A warm shower, holding a pillow like a body, reading 2 pages of a note that reminds you who you are. Rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. You're not weak for needing care. You're injured. You treat emotional bruises like bruises, not like verdicts. To help your future self, build a dark night kit. Screenshots of messages where someone loved you well. Quotes that reminded you your worth doesn't rise and fall with who chooses you. Lines from what I'm sharing here that made your chest loosen. Keep them in one folder, one notebook, one place your shaking hands can still find. What scares me most isn't that the spiral will return. It's when it returns and you think you're back at the beginning. You're not. As long as you can notice, name, and nurture, you're already doing something different. In the next part, we'll look at how to let other people close again without handing them the power to decide, once and for all, what you deserve. Letting people close again asks for something you're almost scared to touch. Hope. Not the big glittery kind that posters talk about. The kind that whispers at night when you're staring at the ceiling, feeling the silence press in, wondering if love has quietly decided you're not on the list. You've probably met performative hope. I just know my person is coming soon. The right one is right around the corner. It sounds confident, it sounds loud. But the hardest part is how fragile it feels when you're the one who has sent the messages that went unanswered, stood at the event feeling invisible, gone home alone while everyone else left in pairs. Big hope shatters fast when real life doesn't match the script. So I don't want you to force that kind of hope. You're not a bad person for rolling your eyes at positive thinking. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling tired, cynical, even a little bitter. After enough hurt, just believe can feel like another way of saying, pretend the pain didn't happen. And you can't. You shouldn't. The scary part is when you think that because you can't feel bright hope, you don't have any at all. What if hope didn't have to be loud? What if it didn't have to be a feeling you manufacture on command, but a behavior you practice in small, stubborn ways? Hope as, I send one message even if the last 10 went nowhere. Hope as, I go to one gathering even if I leave early. Hope as, I tell the truth about what I want one more time even after someone used my honesty against me. Small hope looks like opening the app, not to find the one tonight, but to remember you're still in the game. It looks like staying on the call 5 minutes longer, instead of cutting it off because you're scared you'll like them. It looks like letting yourself be seen in ordinary clothes, on an ordinary day, with an ordinary mood, and deciding that doesn't mean you're unlovable. Everything I've learned about connection points to the same quiet truth. People fall and stay in love less because of perfection, and more because of responsiveness, consistency, shared values. That means love often finds people not at the peak of their confidence, but in the middle of their messy, working on it, quietly hopeful lives. It doesn't mean you have to become endlessly optimistic. It just means you keep leaving the door unlocked, even when you're tempted to bolt it shut. What scares me most is when you decide there's nothing left to try. As long as you're willing to take one more small risk, to show one more real piece of yourself, I am already living in hope, even if you feel empty. In the next part, we'll talk about what those small risks can actually look like with real people. So you're not just waiting for love, you're slowly learning how to let it in without losing yourself. Those small risks matter even more. When you realize this, your life is not a waiting room for love. Think about how many nights you've treated it that way though. You finish work, you scroll, you eat something simple, you lie in bed with the silence humming, and under it all is this quiet belief. None of this really counts until someone is here to see it. The hardest part is how normal that fantasy feels. The movie in your head where real life begins the day you're finally chosen. Suddenly the apartment looks softer. The walks at night feel romantic instead of lonely. The weekends have meaning because there's a hand in yours. It sounds harmless, but there's a cost. Every time you tell yourself that version is the real one, you quietly say that everything you are right now is a draft. Practice. Almost. You start to move through your days like they're rehearsal footage no one will ever watch. You go to work, but the wins feel flat because there's no partner to celebrate with. You cook for yourself, but it feels like a placeholder meal. Something to do for now. You see friends, but part of you whispers, this isn't the family I really want. You're not ungrateful, you're just convinced the main story hasn't started yet. But being unchosen romantically so far doesn't mean you're unchosen by life. It doesn't mean your days are empty of love. It just means the form you want most hasn't arrived yet. In the meantime, the friendships you build, the hobbies you stumble into, the work you care about, the small rituals of care you repeat every morning and every night, these are not consolation prizes. This is the fabric of a life that someone healthy will want to join, not rescue. Think about the people research calls secure in love. They don't feel more deserving. They usually have sturdier lives around them. They have people to text, places to go, small routines that hold them when the night gets long. Love doesn't drop them from the sky into meaning. It finds them already in motion. So I'm asking myself gently, what is one area of your current life you want to honor more? Not as a distraction from love, but as part of the life you hope to share. Is it the way you light a candle and read before bed, even when you feel lonely? The friend you always listen to, but never let in on your own hurt? The art you make and then hide, what if you treated that as real, Not for now. What scares me most is how easily you forget this one truth. I am already a whole person walking through the world. You are not a half-finished version waiting for someone's approval stamp. As long as you keep living like your life counts now, love won't be the moment you become real. It will be the moment someone else finally sees what has been real all along. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to let people see that life, instead of only showing them the version you think they want. So for a moment, instead of asking if anyone will ever love you, I want you to borrow someone who already does. Not from your past, but from your future. Someone who hasn't met you yet, but will one day sit across from you at night and look at you like I am the most obvious choice in the room. Close your eyes, if that feels safe. If it doesn't, just soften your gaze. Picture a kitchen table or a couch with a blanket, or a quiet walk under streetlights. Somewhere ordinary. They're there with you. Not ideal, not perfect, just warm. Their shoulders relax when you enter the room. Their voice softens when they say your name. Have you ever imagined that part? Let them look at you, not the version you perform. You, when you're tired and a little messy, when your laugh comes out too loud, when you start talking too fast about something you care about, and then apologize for rambling. Watch what happens in their face when you do that. They don't flinch. They lean in. This is the moment they fall a little more in love with you, not a little less. The hardest part is believing that the things you've been taught to call flaws could be someone's favorite details. The way you over-explain because you're afraid of being misunderstood. The way you notice small changes in people's moods. The way you care too much about texts and pauses and silence. In your mind, that means you're needy. In theirs, it just means you're attentive, thoughtful, alive. Maybe it feels cheesy, maybe it hurts. You might even feel a little angry at me, like, if this person is real, where are they? There's nothing wrong with that. Of course your chest tightens when you picture what you don't have yet. Of course your brain says, this is fake. Stop. What scares me most is how quickly I agree with the voice that calls us unlovable, and how suspicious we are of any voice that doesn't. So don't force a whole movie. Try 10 seconds, one scene. Them watching you make coffee in the morning and smiling at your bedhead. Them listening to the same story again because you're still hurt and you need to say it twice. Them loving the way you go quiet before you speak because it means you're careful with your words. The scary part is you have no proof yet. But in the real world, people fall in love like this all the time. Not with flawless, confident, never lonely people, but with specific humans. With crooked laughs, soft bellies, anxious texts, awkward first hugs. You're not the exception to how love works. You're not secretly disqualified. Being unchosen so far doesn't mean you're unchoosable. It doesn't mean you've been weighed and found lacking. It just means you haven't met the eyes that light up at your particular way of existing. As long as you can hold this picture, even for a breath, you're loosening the belief that love is only for other people. In the next part, we'll talk about how to let this imagined gaze change the way you treat yourself now, so you stop abandoning the person that future someone is already on their way to love. So here we are, at the question that's been humming underneath every night, every almost, every goodbye that felt like proof. Will anyone ever love me? Not in theory, not in a quote, but you. The you sitting in the dim light, phone face down, trying not to care and caring anyway. The hardest part is this. That question might never vanish completely. Even people in long relationships still wake up some days and quietly wonder if they're really wanted, or if love will leave. The question changes costumes, but it's still about safety. Am I held here? Am I allowed to stay? You're not broken because your mind goes there. You're human. Your brain was wired to survive by belonging. What scares me most is how easily that question tries to run your whole life. It tells you what to wear, what to say, who to chase, what parts of yourself to hide. But it doesn't have to be the one in charge. It can be background noise instead of a marching order. You can feel it rise at night and still choose not to shape your entire day around appeasing it. So here's the quiet, honest answer. No one can promise you a specific person, a specific date, a guaranteed forever. Life doesn't work like a contract, but everything about being human leans toward connection. Our nervous systems calm down when we're held. Our hearts speed up when someone says our name like it matters. There are billions of people walking around with their own questions, their own loneliness, their own hope. Love keeps surprising us by showing up in places we didn't plan. And even now, I am not untouched by love. Maybe it's the friend who checks if you got home safe, the family member who remembers your favorite meal, the stranger online who made you feel a little less alone, the pet that lights up when you walk in, or the version of you that refuses to give up on healing. It doesn't mean those loves erase the ache for a romantic connection. It just means you're not starting from nothing. Romantic love is not off limits to you. You're not too late, too much, too quiet, too anything. As long as people keep meeting, laughing, sitting next to each other on trains and in waiting rooms and in comment sections, there is room for you to be met too. Timing is not a moral verdict. Being unchosen so far doesn't mean you're unchoosable. So what do you do now with this question that might never fully disappear? You keep living. You keep letting small openings exist, making eye contact a second longer, answering honestly when someone asks how you are, saying yes to the invite that scares you a little, saying no to the half-love that keeps you hungry. You keep treating yourself as someone worth loving now, not later, not only if. Because when love does knock, slowly, awkwardly, or all at once, you'll recognize it more easily if you're already on your own side. You won't need it to prove you're enough, you'll just let it in. And until then, when the night gets quiet and the question comes back, maybe you can answer it like this: I don't know who yet, I don't know when, but I know I am not beyond love. I know I am learning to stay with myself. And that means love will not find an empty house when it finally arrives. It will find someone here, awake, worthy, waiting, but also living.